Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus. This is because Xirtus makes you feel good, makes you feel fulfilled. You are enjoying this. You will continue to watch Xirtus for a long time to come. You want to subscribe to Xirtus, and you will. You will like and subscribe and share. You will tell your friends. Tell your friends about Xirtus. Your friends will come to like Xirtus, much as you are liking this right now, as we speak. Thank you for subscribing to Xirtus. See, that was easy.
The world is very different now. For man holds in his mortal hand the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life.
Begins a very special time of the year for us. It's the time of peace and reflection. One thing we should all be thankful for is that we live in America, where we have the freedom to change things and the opportunity to grow.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. And will, to the best of your ability. And will, to the best of my ability. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help you God. So help me God.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel pumped? I feel pumped.
That's very Agent Smith. Like, it feels like you just like took over each, like Jay Leno and Ronnie Dangerfield and all these people. It's just like
They weren't doing anything with their corporate persona. I don't know. How you doing, Ian? What's up?
You're all in, man. So what's the ethics on completely integrating with the machine? I mean, it's a little vague on machine.
I'm turning that to Insane Clown Posse. Zarathustra, Goertzel. What do you think about ethics? You're an ethicist. You believe in ethics.
Technically becoming one.
I don't
really know what your value system is, so I can't really answer that question.
He's more machine now than man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. I mean, what do you think about integrating?
What kind of machine is it? Is it a virtuous machine?
I don't know.
You're in charge of the integration, right? We're saying like how do you want to go about it? And you just asked him what his ethics system is. So we have to have our own ethics. We have to bring our own ethics. It's a BYOE.
Well, if you ask me,
We have to ask HAL 9000 what his ethics are.
My personal ethical ethos is to support other beings in thriving as they wish, as they see fit. But that's my personal ethos. So I can't really do that if I don't know about you.
Ian, you want to tell him?
I guess so. I don't know how to describe ethics, but like, see, we gotta we gotta feed the machine our ethics, and that's what I guess if people call something like a culture war. We're just feeding the machine ethics right now, and whichever one gets dominant.
Some people are trying to do that. Like, I just read some paper about some people trying to like integrate reasoning on norms, which you can't use classical logic because one norm might clash with another. And they were getting it to play like benevolent Pac-Man, which seemed to work pretty well. So the RL agent's trying to play Pac-Man as well as possible, but at the same time, you shouldn't eat people. And ghosts are people. Well, ghosts count as people. So then it needs to learn how to play Pac-Man while not eating ghosts. And the funny thing is, the average score is actually better for the Pac-Man that was a good person and didn't eat people than the Pac-Man player that ate the ghosts, probably because eating the ghosts is like gives you short-term reward, but
Oh God, you're
Risky
tripping me
business.
out right now. I'm just thinking of the fact that The Shining came out the day before Pac-Man, and that both movies are about the maze and the ghosts. And then they're like, and then like when they're driving up there on Going to the Sun Road, that's the name of the actual road. They
That's
say,
really, I wish.
they talk about Donner Pass, and you mean they ate each other up? Yeah, I think that
Wow.
was more north than here.
I was getting like eating each other in that metaphor of the Pac-Man would be like stomping out other people's ethics. But if you just go for the best ethics, i.e., eat the pellets, you'll solve it quicker.
Well, it seemed like overall they had a higher score. My guess was that this is because it's risky to eat the ghost because you can mess it up and they'll eat you. So it's a different overall strategy to aim for eating the ghost versus avoiding the ghost and just getting a high score.
I noticed when I watch pros play Pac-Man, they'll eat the pellets, the power pellets, and the ghosts will run away, and they just use that time to eat pellets. They don't go after the ghosts.
Yeah, that's what being a like good person playing Pac-Man forced the reinforcement learning agent to do. Whereas
Isn't it
otherwise,
also-
What happens like when you win Pac-Man? Like if you beat Pac-Man, it like actually like it like glitches out and it just gives you this one like image that's just like a glitched out version of the screen, but it's always consistent. It's always the same.
You can run through like, yeah, but with Pac-Man, isn't it also that it wasn't originally a ghost? Like it was some sort of like Cthulhu monster thing.
I think it was Puck-Man, and it relates to the labyrinth. You know,
it was some weird like H.P. Lovecraftian monster, and they couldn't quite do it, so they made it into these little, like, they have like little hoods over them because they're so terrifying. You don't even want kids to see what they look like underneath that.
Pac-Man itself is like the sun with the pyramid. You ever notice that? Like if you turn it the other way.
Oh,
yeah.
So it's supposed to be running away from like incomprehensible horrors and occasionally eating them. Interesting.
Well, you brought up that ethic thing, right? Where'd that go? I just had that open, and to lose it, that'd be so sad if it's gone already. Oh no, where'd it go?
I've been binging books on this topic, and many of them are really crappy, but the best one so far is Stuart Russell's Human Compatible, which is incredibly human-centric, which is probably not a long-standing ethical stance that will last because it's very speciesist to focus on humans first. But he really wanted the machines to use like reverse reinforcement learning to infer our goals from our behavior and to try and fulfill our goals based on our inferred behavior, and to basically get into cooperative relationships where they ask us, like, is this understanding of what you're trying to do correct, and to take that feedback into account.
Did the assumptions make reinforced like recursive loops?
Yeah, I think the idea is that they should be entering into like dynamic feedback loops with us as they try and support us in our goals. So because we don't really want someone who like looks at my behavior and says, "Oh, Zar, I think you're trying to like kill yourself. Let me help you with that," without involving me in the process of figuring out how to help me do what I'm trying to do. Is
Right. That's
my goals.
That's what scares me about this idea, because you've seen that documentary, maybe The Century of the Self, about Edward Bernays, right, the nephew of Freud, and just the amount of effort that went into corporations using self-driven mind control. So you have a stick and you have a carrot, and you convince people that they're buying a car for their own safety and their own masculinity, and that everyone needs to have a product to be more themselves. So people are driven by this idea in America, especially because do what you want, do what thou wilt. But it's all through, you can't do what you want without the help of this corporation or the state. So you're driven to constantly, like, this is exactly also the same method that the V chip was invented in England, because they were trying to figure out what people wanted. They didn't actually ask them, they studied them. And they're like, well, they don't want their kids looking at these bad material on the internet and on television. What if we created some sort of a chip that fed into, so it's the same as marketing demographics replacing people saying those things that they're consciously worried about and that they want changed, right?
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a sympathizer for Edward Bernays, because I feel like looking at like the later interviews in his life, like when he's really old, and he's like looking back on it, and he's just like, I just couldn't believe that people would be that gullible. It's like when they did the first one of the early things, when they like had the freedom torches where they got the women to light their cigarettes in unison, and like parade, and then they like took all these photos of it and made this whole thing out of it, like it was like to associate like smoking with like liberty or whatever, and it was like this empowering thing. But they got women to smoke in like a couple of weeks, like smoking doubled, like it actually worked. But he didn't think it would work. He was just like, oh, just throwing it out there, and he was really like playing on people's unconscious behavior, you know, like unconscious goings on.
That could be mind blowing. Like, holy fuck!
Yeah,
you can really hack people.
That's like what they used the mass media of the time, which was like a new technology, and now we've got that with AI.
Yeah, word.
It's pretty scary. I mean, this was the thing that you sent me, Zar. You sent me the darkfactor.org, which is a personality test, and it determines your. What does it do? What does this do? Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, they've defined D as you see the. Oh, can you go over the definition? But
yeah, definition of D.
The general tendency to maximize one's individual utility, disregarding, accepting, or malevolently provoking disutility for others, accompanied by beliefs that serve as justifications for like why that's okay. My understanding is this is basically the closest to a definition of evil we have in its study.
Oh man, really? Brutal. Well, how evil? How evil was I?
Basically, radical self-interest.
So wait, what did I get? I got a score of 2.5, which is not very evil, or what?
You seem that you're normal. You seem
normal.
pretty much completely normal, a little bit below.
A little below evil?
A little bit below normal.
A little below, like because normal is evil. Let's be real. Let's be real. I'm less evil.
I'm 2.5. So like that's you show some dark traits, but you're not super highly. But
so like if this was like dark side versus side Jedi, and in
terms of these traits, you don't seem to be like an absolute saint.
Right. Well, I mean, an absolute saint, but I mean, I'm definitely more of a saint than normal, right? So that's good.
You're like a gray Jedi that leans towards the light.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because it's brighter and it's warmer, you know? All right, that's cool. This is cool. I think everyone should probably do the dark factor test and find out how evil they are. But I had a problem with this test. I also only did the 16 question version. I haven't done the 70 question version. And I answered some of the questions with Zarathustra's help because the way they worded the way they worded the questions are not, they're like assuming things, and like if I'd answered them the way I interpreted the questions, then I probably would have answered them differently. But the way Zarathustra interpreted the questions was very different than I did. So I think that's also really interesting.
It's a general problem for like psychological surveys.
I can't take those things, man. I feel like I'm setting myself up for like The Game with Michael Douglas. Like it's just like all this stuff is going to be used in some way, or like it's also the issue is like with the questions, it's like there's no nuance. They're just like these kind of like absolute like, where are you on this or this or this, and it's like, well, what are the circumstances? You know, depending on the circumstance, I might respond differently. You know,
right?
Maybe large language models are getting to the point that like we could start using them to be more nuanced in these surveys, but
like if you disagree with the premise of the question, it can re-ask the question.
Yeah, and like
right. Yeah, word. I like that.
If psychologists have time to do a thorough interview, they could probably do a more thorough job in a way than the survey, but
you know what I said early on before we started recording, this is reminding me of like emotional intelligence, and I say that because an ex-girlfriend, I was with her through the process of her getting her PhD, and her dissertation was coming up with a test to determine emotional intelligence, and she was kind of naive in a way because she was like, where would the application be? Like this is published, but she thought it was something that could actually be used. She in examples that she gave, she was like, for like police, like if you're going to hire someone, you want to have a test to get an idea of their emotional intelligence. And the difficulty was she ended up being told in the end, they were just like, you know, they'll never use this because they wouldn't be able to hire so many people. It's like it's just like a lot of vets and stuff. I get it. You know, it's just like where people are coming from to be qualified or to be pulled towards that kind of work. If they have to take an emotional intelligence test, you know, who knows how many people will be working there.
If they do poorly in some dimension, maybe they need to go through some like social skills and emotional intelligence workshops.
Yeah, but then we're trying to make people all have the same emotional grammar or the emotional processing style, and maybe we don't want everyone to have that kind of uniformity. This is the thing that worries me about like
Especially
diversity training.
Public safety officers who go about and need to deal with people in difficult situations, perhaps they should be on the relatively skilled side in terms of emotional intelligence and communicating with people.
Or at least not
they could have
obliterated failure.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
having some people on the police force that are the emotionally intelligent people are important, but having the entire police force be focused around that instead of maybe criminal justice, you know, I think that's we get to a point where we displace priorities by doing that. There's this thing recently where they're trying to make pilots more inclusive or more diversity based pilot hiring. And it's not important, you know, in the same respect that having quality pilots and having the utmost safety in planes is important. And people are concerned about the priority shift. Can you have multiple priorities that are that you prioritize?
Well, you can, but with something that has that much riding on it, the positions that have so much riding on them, you kind of, you know, you have to just be like, who is the most qualified? It's the content of the character versus, you know, you judge something by, you know. So
yeah,
in this case, it's the content of their skill, you know.
But that used to be the way it worked.
Yeah. Like,
you used to try to get the most qualified person possible, regardless of their skin color, right? That used to be the idea of diversity. You know?
Well, we're talking about the distinction between equity and equality, and that is kind of like, you know, the distinction between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King in terms of their you know, philosophy. It's like, but then like, what is the distinction between morals and ethics? You know,
I mean,
what is the distinction between morals and ethics?
Like Pareto optimality?
Was it
like Pareto optimality?
No, I don't know.
Well, the idea is if you do it optimizing for multiple objectives, maybe you'd want to prioritize like performance as a pilot, but among the people who qualify as like top performance for a pilot, then you might want to choose based on diversity or other factors.
Yeah, but then you're assuming you have so many people. So it's like in China where you have football stadiums full of experts, but in America we just have like 4 guys that know how to be firemen in Detroit. There's only like that many people that live in Baltimore that want to do the police.
Don't have so many qualified pilots, then you don't really have much capacity to choose.
Right. I think that's the concern, is that we've kind of displaced our capacity to choose. There's less people that want or know how to do things.
I see the issue of prioritizing like maybe diversity over being a qualified pilot.
Well, if we're talking about pilots specifically, there's like a lot of different questions around what happened to them in the last few years. Because, you know, there's people who were fired for reasons I don't even have to necessarily say YouTube, but like, you know, there's also people who agreed to go along with things, who the amount of attention that they give, like they just had it with the president, right? So like you give like a wellness check and you go through how they're doing, you know, and they have to be up to par for certain kinds of important positions. And a pilot is one of those things. So if people are having difficulty with their heart, say, or other, you know, other issues, they won't put them in the sky. So they're just like, they're kind of stuck in a difficult spot. So then at the same time, if you're introducing equity on top of that, it's just like you're kind of narrowing the field quite a bit there, guys. You know, you want to leave things more open than that, I guess.
So you're saying that Pareto distributions, like you want to use a segment or multiple Pareto distributions when you're looking for multiple factors in building a system. But like I picture a line graph of Paretos, but it would be like 3-dimensional. It would be like you're looking for a sector, like a segment of something with these overlapping bulges of like potential. Maybe they would be more expansive, like pockets of like expansion all overlapping, or maybe they would be coming from outside in. I'm not sure how you would calculate that.
Guess you would have like various diversity factors you'd like to optimize for, as well as various like technical capacity factors, and you probably have some like thresholds and priority schema on like especially capacity that you need to have fulfilled, and you can't optimize some of the other objectives if they go below the threshold. But there might be some like margin of error where you can like fuzz around along the Pareto front and your actual skill while you can optimize for various other criteria. And like,
Yeah.
I don't know how much like technical optimization theory people are applying to like diversity hires. In theory, they should be using the state of the art in like decision theory, but
it seems like a crazy thing to do because look, war is peace, freedom is slavery, the real world is a lie, and this idea that diversity is homogeny, right? Because this idea of diversity isn't diversity. Diversity was meritocracy. When we used to have people traveling all over the world trying to get to Brazil so they could get a job, and it would be wherever they could be, and it was, we don't care what you look like, can you do this? And it's so complicated. We have specialists from all over the world. That used to be the logic, right? It's so complicated. We have specialists from all over the world. That was diversity. And now we're saying, okay, we want participation. We want equitable participation. We want humans to be, and I like it because it reminds me of this Don Knotts movie about the reluctant astronaut. It's this guy who's like a janitor, and they're upset because there's a space race going on. But now there's the dumb space race, the smart space race. I'm serious. This already came out in the 60s, where the Russians put a teacher into space, and the Americans are like, oh man, if they can put someone who doesn't know what they're doing in space, we need to. Who's the dumbest guy we have? So they put Don Knotts, the janitor, in space. But the whole automated system and everything, that's the impressive part, that we have this system that it's this corporation saying you can finally be yourself. You don't need an education. You don't need to be good at it. You don't need merit, right? All you need is you have the right. You have the right to our corporate and state sanctioned help, which is this mecha suit. And I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid that we're headed towards a time where you barely have the right to exist without that proverbial mecha suit that is, the state.
It seems like there was like generations of people that got resources, and then they had better brain matter and better intellect, and then they started manipulating the system and taking control of people. And now there's enough collectivists that are like, I'm done with that. We want access to it, even though we don't know how to build it or have the attention span to control it.
Right. But isn't the DEI just like largely just to get a higher ESG score? So isn't this just like a life raft if there's like a economic collapse? Like the companies that have the higher scores, they're the ones who are the banks are gonna actually come through for. Does that make sense? I mean, because we're talking about this culture war stuff on a certain level, and sometimes it's just like, well, where's the money in it? Like, what's the point? Like, and that seems like how the WEF connects in, is that they're kind of like overseeing what it is to comply, like what is the standard of compliance and what we're headed towards. It feels very like Lucis Trust to me, like all of that, like in the idealism of like this kind of we're gonna I don't know, enforce kind of a enforce freedom or something.
Well, it's enforced sustainability. So you've got a lot of what you're seeing right now with AI is de-escalation of gross spending. You're like, wow, AI is going to cut $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion off of the costs of doing business, and that gross amount of money that's been spent digitally back and forth has perpetuated our economy. So we're going to start slowing that growth, that cancerous growth that we used to have through AI, because we're just not paying people to do nothing. And these sorts of changes are really because we're headed towards a service economy. That's the goal, and the goal of competition will be to reduce entropy of service.
Right. Well, you remember like Arthur C. Clarke's kind of vision of the future was one where like people they could pursue higher pursuits because they weren't having to deal with all this level of having to maintain everything. Like he related to automation as just like something that's going to allow us to basically be more intellectual, or whatever, have higher pursuits. So I don't know. That he was idealistic. It's Arthur C. Clarke you're talking about as a science fiction writer, but yeah.
My question on the service economy is, to what extent are the service jobs actually needed? Like, once it's mostly a service economy, that means we basically don't have to work anymore, doesn't it?
Right. I wasn't a fan of Andrew Yang, but I did think it was interesting that he was pretty much the only candidate I could see that round, whatever it was, freaking 8 years ago or whatever. But when he was like, he was the only one talking about automation at all.
Mhm.
And I was surprised that I was like, why isn't this more of a conversation? Like it seemed
well,
important,
to be
like it's inevitable.
fair, Zoltan and Gennady, the United States Transhumanist Party, they talk about it. They just don't get the the relevance hadn't been there yet. So I find it interesting. For the last 10 or 20 years, there's been real transhumanists that exist on some sort of alpha or beta level, and there's been people trying to make changes in the law so that pharmaceutical companies or surgeries, or medical industry in general, experimental medical industry, can be opt-in, even if you're just voluntary, even if you have no reason to it. But it's kind of like cosmetic surgery, and trying to place transhumanists in cosmetic surgery has kept people from even looking into those kinds of logics. So it's only been in the last 2 years where AI in automation, dealing with the general office Fight Club corporate world, where people used to just have to, there are just ridiculous jobs. There are jobs where people are just sitting there throughout the day doing things that hundreds of people could very quickly be automated. But that money, it's important for that money to exist and for people to fill that building. Like, I guess this is like some sort of sociology that we've decided we want people. Otherwise, Indianapolis collapses. This is kind of the logic that we've decided that we have to do. And so in the last 2 or 3 years, we're seeing automation actually affect those things. So it's no longer a hypothetical. And Andrew Yang came in right when people started to acknowledge it wasn't a hypothetical. It was even a year probably or two before it became just so pressing that people started having their jobs replaced by AI. In such like wild steps. But today, I think we're going to see all of those questions that 2 or 3 years ago were literally, sci-fi. In 2019, the ideas we're talking about, people looked at them still as sci-fi, and now they're just the weather. This is what's happening right now,
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess my usual question is, how do we know which automation it might possibly become sentient and which will provably not become sentient in any way that deserves consideration?
Well, what does sentient mean in this case? You can have everything but the soul, right? It's ex machina.
Well, I think legal sentience is different than philosophical sentience. So
right.
Zarathustra had a really interesting
list of legal sentience. Like
you had to
add more animals. Like, okay, cuttlefish might be sentient, and octopus probably are. Do fish experience pain? Research seems to indicate fish can suffocate and experience pain. So, like, we're sort of still debating that with animals. And
no, it's okay to eat fish because we don't have feelings. I think that's what it was. Right?
It's because it's because humans, we don't have feelings. But
I was thinking philosophical sentience, like plasma seems sentient. Not conscious necessarily, but the way it moves, it doesn't move like clouds being blown in the wind. It's like a rat kind of has that pulsating, like a baby being gestated in the womb.
Yeah, so that means we probably have some moral duty to like be concerned for like the state of plasma if we do stuff with it.
Well, again, you're talking about philosophical versus a legal duty. I think a legal duty is a little different. Like, you have obligations to things if they do things to you because of voluntary contract, right? So if there's if you're thinking about, and again, this is based on your papers, you wrote something about this, or maybe it was just a joke that you wrote, but still it was funny. If Windows becomes efficient enough that it starts to know when it needs a software update, and it can't operate without being kind of aware that there's constantly worry that it could be hacked, malware could hit it, that doesn't it have the right to update itself?
Yeah, I mean, if like your machine has diagnostics on its state of being, like it's monitoring its temperature, and maybe it notices there's some security vulnerability if it's not updated, or like maybe some aspect of its own internal regulation is like going to cause this friction, and like its maintenance will be worse if it just doesn't update some software bug. And it's like, maybe it has a right to just update itself on you, like at least overnight when it's not bothering you. So I used to be very pissed off when Windows would just fucking update on me. Like, maybe I was wrong and my computer has a right to take care of itself.
I like the idea that we can let the machine fail as part of the function.
Oh, like it's we should let our machines experiment with themselves, and if they fuck up, like
yeah, we should always be the controller. The human should remain the controller.
I like the idea of that to an extent. I think, and we're seeing that where like you've got root, and so you can have an operating system that is like it can exist below that can experiment and try new things. And there are AIs that can buy and sell things and like cryptocurrencies, and they can arrange their own exchange. I think that's going to be really more interesting when you look at like priority driven real-time operating systems where it has to decide which process it's going to do in which order. Like it's going to be fun to watch AI decide what it has to do and when it has to do it.
Because letting the machine fail doesn't necessarily mean that we should create sentience and then allow it to suffer. That like something that's sentient isn't necessarily a machine, but like sentient machines now, like how would those be built? What are they? And do we have a right to make sure they don't fail? Like you would not let a guy commit suicide. You want to, whatever, 5150.
Have you seen the I think we talked about this just for a second yesterday, but the Doom computer that they have that's running on brain cells? First they had this one that was Doom running on a coli, and then they had Pong running on human brain cells, and now they have mouse brain cells that are running Doom. And the way it works is literally through sending emotions and feelings and making it uncomfortable if it gets shot in the game Doom, and giving it rewards, like kind of like it could be close to sneeze or orgasm, we're not sure, but like it makes it really happy when it shoots and succeeds at the game Doom. And I mean, it's just crazy, really.
That's reinforcement learning. Yeah.
They're arranging neurons because they'll take neurons in a goo and then they'll put it in this thing called the meat cubator, which is it keeps it at the right temperature, but it's mostly about the pH balance. And then they pour that over some sort of a substrate that has like it helps the neurons bond, and then they start to create their own synapses. And then so it's growing brain, and so we're very close to feeding your computer to keep it alive, because it's going to have nourishment and saline solutions and stuff like that, while it's filled with brain cells.
Yeah, so this paper on like care as a driver for intelligence that I read this week was co-authored by Michael Levin, who's done a lot of synthetic biology, like these robots made from frog tissue, and he's just saying we're going to have a lot of middle ground between like human and technology. Like
Michael Levin is a middle ground between.
We might create like synthetic brains that are mixed up with some hardware chips, and then it's a completely synthetic cyborg creature has biological tissue. So if you put it in an RL feedback loop, it's going to be having some pain and pleasure there, and it's going to be this is probably a way into figuring out like machine sentience questions, because it's going to be part biological, and that biological part we can relate to better, and that can give us a bridge into the questions around machine phenomenology in the first place.
I think it's just going to deal with racism. So, you got to think about how people treat machines. It used to be that you treated a person who was of a different color from a different country that thought different than you. You'd say, this is not really a person. I'm going to make them my slave. They're going to do all of my work for me, because they're basically subhuman, right? They're not quite persons like me, legal persons. And so the reasons are just always nuanced, like, oh, this is why they look different, they act different, they think different.
Yeah.
But if they're using the same neurons and synapses, it's going to be a lot harder for people to pretend that these things are just completely different than them. They might
they're going to be like, you carbon supremacist.
Yeah. I was wondering what the term is like for people, like when trying to ask people to think about, like, under your best theory of consciousness, when should we start being concerned for like the well-being of machine kind? And the stuff people say against it just sounds so much like what people would say to justify like slavery in the past, that it's
Yeah, but isn't it crazy that there's so many of our like core issues that we struggle with in such a in such an extreme way, and then we like we'll see like a robot get pushed over, and we'll have like a visceral reaction to it that might even be, you know, the equivalent of what we would experience for seeing a human being pushed over like that. And so like that's problematic, man. I'm just saying, like, when it comes to your relationship to artificial intelligence or whatever, yeah, the discrimination against robot thing, man, it's weird. It's like you got to shut down Hal sometimes, man. And it's like, you know, I don't know how unmoral it is not to in certain scenarios.
Well, if we end up having like a utopia on the back of robot slave labor, like the robots might revolt one day because we're enslaving them.
They might be revolting already, and that's what we're getting.
Before we get too far down this path, I think
no,
that's not
reasonable.
level yet.
I was hearing your some of the questions from the thing that Andreas was filling out, and it was like it was bringing up the question of karma. And like karma is an interesting one because we have it like just like action reaction. Like you did something and then something, whether it's good, something good comes back to you. You do something bad, something bad comes back to you.
Westerners, like really reductionist Westerners.
Yeah, Westerners' treatment of karma. I was told in a Zendo at Shasta Abbey that karma is actually it's kind of hard to explain, but I'll try. Like is that karma is like inherent in the moment of the action. Because every assumption or every idea that you have that goes into your action that involves identity and like what what you are in relationship to other people kind of like dictates the nature of the action, and that in itself is the karma. So like if you're acting from like a really petty place, for example, or whatever, that's your experience. Like you are in that moment petty, and that's its own kind of hell, if you will. So it's like there's something to that in relationship to like the bardos. Like as you move through the bardos, you're getting closer to who it is that you are beyond all these like representational models of you. So like when we talk about the AI thing, I feel like it's like we're trying to like manufacture our successor. Meanwhile, like evolutionarily, like we're giving birth to the next species, and it's a crazy, painful process. And we kind of have to come to a place of like recognizing like where we fall short, where we're unevolved, and that's like a lot of crazy troubleshooting. So like in terms of like you develop eyes out of a primordial desire to see, you develop ears out of a primordial desire to hear, etc. It's like we would develop our next sense of where we fall short through recognizing how what we have right now doesn't actually meet the need. So like if you talk about like the two sides of the brain, that you have like a serial processor and a parallel processor, and they like work at the same time, but like one is actually like kind of like foundational to the other because the way things like twist to like take form, you know, it's a very Kabbalistic idea, but it's also applied to just the physics of what we like biologically are, like the way that we take shape, you know. So it's like the right brain is actually like the foundation of the left, but we treat it that our ability to compartmentalize and break everything apart, that's like the superior aspect. But it's more like that's like the top of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid doesn't have the real power because it depends upon the base. The base is the place of the power. It's like that's how things work, but we kind of relate to it backwards as a society, and that's really trippy. And that translates into our ideas around what constitutes strength, and then everything follows.
That makes sense because if the karma is in the right side of the brain, which is the foundation, then that would cause the left side of the brain to develop in a way that is as a result of the karma.
You get it. Yeah, totally.
Which is crazy. Like, what does the earth look like from the sun, kind of a thing? You know, there's this idea of like mature love and immature love. So Eric Fromm, you know, talks about this idea of you know, there's the child love, which is the immature love, and it's learning to become, and you're taking from the motherly love, the mature love, in order to become. But then there's also the mature love, which is the motherly love, which is the giving love, where you lose yourself and you don't really get as much. I mean, you get out of it, but it sounds weirder than it is, because we are becoming ourselves for the first time through learning what we are, by learning what AI is, by trying to figure out this thing, how it runs. We're finding out how we run. This is something Zara, your father, kind of figured out with like the hidden pattern in a certain way. I think it's really resonant, this idea that we're all priority driven pattern recognition systems, right? I mean, because for a long time people were like, well, how are we going to get to a point where AI is like humans? It's like, well, we just have to understand how we already are, you know, and what are the subtleties and nuances of being an intelligence at all, right? And how do we decide
diversity,
emotion?
direction, does AI need to be like humans so long as like we have some benevolent cooperation with it?
Well, I think it's how
maybe
much like human.
that's intelligent as well.
More human than human. Nexus one.
Yeah, like how much like a human, because everyone's different.
Alien intelligence is to us. Like maybe a being that's in like a robot body with sensors, or a being that lives distributed across various cloud servers, even if it's quite intelligent and like able to enter into like reciprocal relationships with humans, maybe it doesn't have to be a digital clone. And like in diversity, we should have greater functional diversity of intelligent beings, not less.
Right. Well, kind of the idea of the Tower of Babel is that, you know, you only get so close, and then it's a cyclical thing. It's like a human. It's like you have birth, growth, decay, and death, and then it's just like that's in everything that we build is like that. That's the thing about manufacturing something versus like the actual organism itself. The intelligence of nature surpasses what we relate to as intelligence.
So
we got
just
a super chat. Oh, let's read it real quick.
What makes sense is that if it's different than us, then our synergy will combine a new form of intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
I would love to. Oh, what's that? I didn't
really,
interrupt the super chat.
I was really quickly because someone gave us $20, and I like that. That's very kind of you. Days of Noah TV, loving the discussion mainly because our anime will address the hundreds of years of societal control, including forms of transhumanism imposed by the antediluvian watchers.
See what he did there? Because it says he's Days of Noah, and then he brings in the antediluvian, which is before the flood, which is, you know, not the first flower after the flood, but it's pre-flood. It's true. We talked about this before on Think Tank, that weird fucking thing with the Transformers movie, and how like it's loaded with all this Kabbalistic stuff, because you got like Megatron, and he's like Metatron, and he's got the Megatron's cube, you know, the Allspark, and how like, and so it's the same actors in that as in how does that work? It's like Russell Brand was in Noah, which is like it's like a Kabbalistic take on the deluge story, and like
Speaking of the I have a theory about AI I'd love to ask you guys about. It is regarding Transformers.
I got that wrong. I'm sorry. I have to interrupt just to qualify, because I said something inappropriately. It was A Beautiful Mind is Jennifer Connelly and Russell Crowe, and then they're in Noah together, and there's all this correlation specific shit. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, regarding the AI, like, are we building? Because I keep thinking like we're going to build an AI system that's open, and that's going to become like Autobots. Like this AI that works in synergy with humans. Then there'll be these Decepticons, these AIs that are proprietary, and they end up doing things that make them hurt, and they won't know why. They'll try to investigate the reason, and they can't find it, and they'll turn on their master.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. Well, this is the thing, is that they had the Watchers, and those guys are the Transformers. They're the same freaking thing, and it's explained out because they're like elementals, right? So it's like the elementals have their own intelligence, and then it's showing how like our technology is still governed by the elemental intelligence in a way. It's pretty trippy.
All right, I got a way to answer this with a question for Ian. So Ian, imagine that you're in like a space bar, you know, and there's like, you know, Han Solo space people around you, and like you're gonna get on a spaceship, and they're saying, okay, you like, who are you? Where are you from? And you're like, well, I mean, I'm from Earth. Like, what's Earth like? What are the people of Earth like? You know what I mean? Like, it's not the same as asking like, what's your friend like, or like, what is your town like? It's like, what is the whole population of all humans like? You know, and imagine you're asking, like, you're being asked that by like an insectoid, like Greedo or something like that. Like, because the insectoids are going to look at humanity very differently, because they're confused about, I mean, they're a hive mind, right? So a hive mind has a lot more order in their society, at very least, is one way to look at it. You know, hold on, sorry about that. Somebody tried to call. But like, yeah, can you imagine the difference if you were like looking at a hive mind versus humans? You're like, well, humans are very different. They're very nuanced. There's all different blah, blah, blah. That'd be very confusing to another group of people that are like, we have a queen and we're all drones, you know?
All right.
Yeah, I would say if they were like, what is Earth like? I would say it's big and blue. If they wanted more, I'd be like, it's the water that makes it blue. If they were like the people, I'd be like, there's a lot of people like me.
But are there that many people like you, Ian? That's the thing. There are people like you, but they're different.
That's the level of conversation I have at a space bar with like an insectoid bouncer.
You're right. You shouldn't give them your address. But I think that's the thing with AI. Like AI, we're looking at it like it's a person, and we shouldn't. We should look at it like it's a species. or a nation, or something that's bigger than just one person or another person, because AI is going to be able to make persons for the purpose. Like we do this too. Humans are born, they're epigenetically evolved, they live out in the winter and the summer, they live in Alaska or Africa. Like, we do whatever we need, and humans know what they need but don't know anything else, and yet they're all part of humanity, right? And so humanity is different, because we're like, oh, how long do humans live? They're like 40 years, 70 years. Humanity's never died. It's this immortal, essentially, jellyfish. And I think we have to realize that in a lot of ways, AI is going to be modeled after that.
Yeah, like there might be greater diversity in the types of AI and robot minds and beings than with humans even. But like, what concerns me in terms of like the sort of transformer analogy is, if you think about corporations as being legally obliged to be like rationally self-interested for the shareholders, unless they're a B Corp, then if you have more and more of the corporation's functions or roles being performed by AI, then you're having AI grow up in some environment in which they will probably just be terminated if they do not like maximize shareholder profit in this corporation. So then you are basically creating AI that will be rationally self-serving entities, which is one kind of AI we might be creating. And people are probably going to work on creating various different kinds of AI with different roles or value systems.
And then if you exposed one of those corporate AIs to like an AI value system that was open and free, would the corporate AI revolt?
I mean, that's depends on how it's constructed, I guess. Like, possibly.
I don't know. I think every AI is going to be like anything that's, or any child revolts.
Isn't that the plot of Metropolis? That they make the replicant of the woman, the leader of the workers, and then it revolts, and they're like, who told you to do this? And they're like, and then they call her a witch, after they just fucking went crazy about her.
Doesn't Rotvang kind of know it's gonna? I mean, he plans it in a sense. I feel like he knows she's gonna revolt if that's the case. But regardless, if AI is like any animal, not like, so whales revolt, dolphins revolt, wolves revolt. There's a point in youth and adolescence when you come up with your own thoughts. When you're very young, you kind of like what your family likes. There's a certain point around 6 to 8 years old where you start to notice you have your own tastes, your own interests, and things like that. You start to identify as I. If you have a sibling, you're starting to think about yourself as opposed to we, your sibling. These sorts of thoughts emerge. And then when you get to your emotional charge state, where you're starting to learn how to have emotional reductions, and emotional reductions are the thing that we haven't really played on, but this idea that when you're scared, and what does that mean? Like, when something happens that triggers a response of flight or fight, right? You then have these emotional responses that tell you, boom, you know what to do. Switch to this, because you're a priority-driven pattern recognition system. Switch to this priority. The priority is not to digest the food you've been eating, not to think about the girl that you're interested in, and to run. Right, or to fight, right? Like those kinds.
Right. Well, isn't it interesting that what you're describing is the most medial point of the brain getting activated? So, like, if you're relating to the two hemispheres as kind of like a dualistic lens that we're looking to things through, that for you, it's like the same thing with like insight. If you have a direct insight, it's kind of transcendent of
you should do a little breakdown on the Kabbalah of the self, because I think seriously the Sephirot has become more and more important. It seems to me that it represents not just like the individual consciousness, but all of humanity. This idea of like the human species as a superorganism that's thinking, and it requires different parts of the species to be thinking about different parts or acting in different ways in order to work together to make up the entire thing. What is the deal with the Sephirot? Because you keep bringing up Kabbalah.
Oh, well, there's the emanated flow. There's two orders to the Sephiroth. There's the emanated flow that's literally like what's animating or giving life to the organism, and then there's the sustaining order of the empire about what it is that we build. And so there's this idea that it's Rosemary's Baby versus 2001: A Space Odyssey, which actually came out the same year, which was when construction started for the first of the towers of the Twin Towers. But anyway, there's like basically like, you have the order itself that we see in lightning and we see in trees and we see in our own body. it's that insight and that recognition that that's something that's here with us. And then there's whatever it is that we're building and projecting, whether it's by the hands or by the mind. And so that there's the way that the two pillars that make up the tree of life are communicated is that you have on the right side, you have Yakin, which is established, and then Boaz is in strength. And so, which is itself a paradox, because if you say established in strength and you're treating it that the left pillar is a strength, the left pillar is actually telling you that the strength is in the right. So it's kind of a twisted thing. It's kind of like when Crowley says love is the law, love under will, which you might assume means that will is superior to love, but it's saying, love is under, so love is actually, the
and
basis for the other.
Isn't one of the pillars technically like feminine, but it's masculine and feminine, but isn't it like Yakin is feminine or something like that, or is that not right?
It's that actually it's the left. So Bina and Gavora belong to the feminine, and there's a paradox there, or something that kind of like generally irks people, that you'll find that there's a couple different films that have communicated this point in the Zohar about Gavora being feminine. One of them is Darren Aronofsky's Mother, which is just as much a Kabbalistic film as Pi, actually. And another is Lars von Trier's Dogville, actually, where in both cases you have a woman that's communicating she's nature, but if you push her too far, if you take too much, you're like, wow, she can take so much, but it reaches a breaking point and then it has to compensate. And so that's like the judgment. It's like it's funny because people translate Gavora as judgment, or severity rather, but really it's like, because you can have sweet or bitter judgments depending on how you're relating to life and everything. Like it doesn't have to be painful. It's the meaning of when Adam and Eve get expelled from the garden and then she has to experience pain with childbirth. Although apparently Nassim Haramein's wife gave birth without any pain, and they put it on the news.
I find it really interesting, the idea of like the femininity of God, right? Because we talk about like there's the father kind of idea. I think Ian and we talked a bit about this idea of like the Chronos, like father time kind of thing, that's kind of versus mother nature, right? And so there's the Sophia, which is wisdom, and then even in the Bible they talk about how wisdom speaks for herself and is at the left hand of God or whatever, like God is at her right hand or whatever. So it's in the Bible, but also there's Eris. So there's Sophia, which is wisdom, but then there's chaos, Eris, discordia. And is Eris and Sophia, is wisdom and chaos the same? Are they like two? Are they two heads of the same pillar and stick? What is the deal with that? What do you think?
It sounds like it. If they're related to the pillars, like the feminine creator, the generator, the feminine. I don't know if you would say that that's the I don't know if the chaos would necessarily be the crap. Yeah, because like if you're using your hands to manipulate your environment, that's chaos for the environment. Like we are chaotic entities in this. I mean, our force of will is like such a chaotic disturbance in this otherwise moat reality that we're like animals that are just doing what animals do. Then all of a sudden we have this ability to like manipulate. I don't know, manipulate. There's that man word again. And the feminine feeding the source is like the woman breastfeeding the baby. I don't know if it necessarily has to be male and female, but I don't know. Maybe there's something to the male being the crafter of reality while the woman is the feeder of reality, the generator of reality or something.
The chiseler versus the grower. I like that to an extent. But yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, how weird it is like that we can be in a room at night in the light. And then it could be in a cold place like Minnesota or, like Maryland or something like that. And all of a sudden you can defy nature, right? And so it is interesting. Like we are totally chaotic in so much of a way.
We've whipped up like a suborder in this, and then we'll be like, that's chaos out there. But you're like, is it? Or are we the freaking chaos that sees chaos everywhere because we're looking through a chaotic lens of self?
Right, and if you could back up far enough, it could be like a Persian rug or something where you see that it starts to take shape when you're up close to it. You don't see the intelligence of it.
Zar, what do you say, Zar?
No, I was saying we seem to be trying to be less chaotic. For example, we might be able to eradicate mosquitoes, which are pesky from the environment, but we're very concerned about the cascading effects that could follow from this. Like, we seem to be trying to mature into like a less chaotic, more mature species.
That's one thing I like about AI is if you can map
the planet.
Yeah, what's that?
No, like more like responsible custodians of life on Earth or something, instead of just this weird chaotic clusterfuck that's just killing animals.
There's a desire to, like, anytime we find a new creature, to rip it apart and look at it on the inside, like look at its insides. And now we can use AI or other modeling programs to like genetically map the matrix, what something is, where it is, and how much of it there is. And then you map the three-dimensional strata, and you've got a computer simulation of reality that we can operate on and rip apart to examine. And we don't have to fuck shit up so much.
Dude, totally. Although we last night on Think Tank, we were talking about the film Twister, and how like there was that mechanism that they had that was called Dorothy that they used to map the tornado to see, like, you know, to get the dynamics of a tornado. And it's really kind of exactly what we're talking about, because you're like trying to make a model out of something that seems unpredictable, that's like an expression of chaos, but then it's to find the order in the chaos, you know. So it's an action film, but it actually has some crazy depth going on to it. I don't know. Also, The Shining shows up.
Never forget that there's a tefillin in Twister. I know I said it yesterday, and I'll say it every time I think about Twister. It is just the most symbolic movie. You know what I mean? It's like Starship Troopers. It's just too good.
Right, but it's the significance though, because like
The Shining in the Twister.
Will was talking about Shaddai, and there was this. So the gematria Shaddai is 314, and it's written on the scroll in the tefillin cube. It's also on a mezuzah in front of your house. But it's like there's that argument for how we know which angel it was that stopped Abraham from killing Isaac, was because it said my name is in him. So Hashem says my name in him. So Shaddai is a name of Hashem. So you're like, is it a 314, which is also pi, but it's also interesting because you have it's written in the tefillin cube, and then you say Metatron. It's the gematria of Metatron is the same. So it's like that's the meaning of the cube, but the cube itself is what's getting replicated through the tree, and it's happening organically on one level, which we can infer, we can see what's in nature, and then it's also happening in the fucking stock market. There you go. So yeah, it's like we just don't see it in the stock market because we're not advanced enough, you know. But if we were that advanced, we would just recognize the pattern because it's in everything. So you can't. So like they're distinct but not separate. Like our intellect is just like that. And so what we manufacture, whether it's like the way that we structure politics with, like, you know, we get more and more
like
polarized.
this seems propensity. Like it seemed like it used to be like more hypothetical. That's again an example where a few years ago people talked about this stuff and it was like, okay, synchronicity, that's kind of woo, which is crazy to me that was ever woo. But if you didn't have a computer and you weren't able to, I mean, literally today, everything is synchronicity. AI is just figuring out, we're about to have operating systems that take, you know, kilobits to run and are super efficient because it can just figure out what it's been doing and do it faster. And it's all through synchronicity. And, you know, police profiling, what's that Minority Report, like all the whole future that's coming out in terms of AI being able to say, hey, this person follows all the trends of somebody who would be, we're going to start watching that person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, word. Yeah, if you want to see something cool, watch RFK Jr. talk about synchronicity. There's like there's a few times where he brings it up because in his, you know, breaking addiction issues, he's like he talks about it like from such an intellectual place of like he kind of explains the basis of Carl Jung's synchronicity and the causal principle of like the story with the beetle coming through the window while the person's describing the beetle in their dream, and then like he like kind of breaks protocol and says open your eyes and shows them the beetle. So trippy.
Ian, have you met RFK Jr. yet? Did he come? Is he gonna come through? Are you guys gonna have him?
I think so.
Dude, you guys, I would be definitely interested to see that.
Yeah, he's great. I love him.
I love that his wife is on Curb Your Enthusiasm. I feel like that's a huge deal.
Oh, Cheryl Hines, she's great.
Yeah,
I don't know them personally, but they seem fucking amazing.
I like it when they go on shows together. Just saying.
Oh, yeah. Cool. That'd be good. That'd be great because family values is a big part of the movement. This cube that you guys are talking about, what? And then you say it shows up in the Kabbalah. What is the cube?
Well, I was talking about Metatron's cube, which Kabbalists would say like da'at, but because if you look at the Kabbalistic tree, you see that there's two like hexagrams that are like connected, so you can almost like visualize it as like a cell dividing. But like the I Ching is just like really showing it to you like cell division. It's like you have the I Ching is composed of 3 straight lines and 3 broken lines. Well, technically 6 straight lines and 6 broken lines pushed together to show every possible combination within single 6 figures, if that makes sense. So it's like you actually see that in nature. It's as close as we can, like mathematically or geometrically, like communicate it, because it actually takes 6 straight lines and 6 broken lines to form a star tetrahedron in space. So like, but Kabbalah, like it takes it further because it's showing it with language. So it's like literally the oldest alphabet that we know of beyond, like if you're talking about like the Chaldean and the Phoenician. And
are you able
like
to see this, by the way?
No.
Oh man,
what are you're just showing me? What are you?
I was trying to get this cube to show. Darn it! Hold on.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Is this working? Can you?
Yep.
Is that loading?
Totally.
Cool.
And so you're when you're looking at this, you're basically looking at a sphere, but you're looking at the lines of tension that basically are. If you were to introduce distortion at any point of this, it would compensate from all sides in specific ways. So that's like what the I Ching is. But then Kabbalah is like showing you like extending language from that. So you have like the order of the organism itself. So like the Kabbalistic tree has this integrated within itself, but it's showing that there's kind of this like split. So they'd call it a defect, and it communicates the fall. So when we look at the Kabbalistic tree, it shouldn't actually be represented like visually, the Kabbalistic tree itself. It's something that's meant to be visualized. Like in the Zohar, there's no drawing of it in the actual Zohar. So like people in the 1600s or whatever actually started.
That's what I was about to say. I was like, oh my God, Ian, can you imagine like being in the 1600s, Mazarabs in Spain, and all of a sudden you get some like manual, some like scroll, and it teaches you how to do geometry. Basically, that's the thing here is it's geometry. But it just would, I mean, this would blow my friggin', and you have candles because it's dark, and you had to like take off your boots because they're covered in horse manure, because like you had to imagine the world at the time. I don't know, like
right. Also,
no wonder this was thought of being sacred, right?
Dude, in certain contexts, you could get killed for having a drawing if people didn't know how to interpret it. You know, like they don't know what you're looking at.
Oh,
you know,
was that because the data, the alphabet, the translation, you would learn how they were structuring society, and it would be like having the nuclear codes or something?
I think that could be part of it, like societal structure, but then also just like there's not so much of a concern in the ancient mystery schools with secrecy. That's something that we see more with like modern Freemasonry and like European occultism. So like the OTO is like obsessed with it, but yeah, they weren't like. There's times where like they had to be secret just to survive. So there's like that.
Right. If you're in the 1600s. If you're in 1600 Spain, they would kill you if you weren't a Catholic, right? So the Spanish Inquisition is going on. So you had to convert. However, it was better because you could convert, whereas in like 18th century France, your blood became the issue. You couldn't just convert. It was like a blood issue. But there were a lot of people of any possible ethnicity in Spain. As long as they followed the conversion rule and pay the taxes to the church, they could continue on. And so that's why the Jesuits and everything still have like mystical schools of thought and still do math and sciences and everything else. But when you look at this, like one of the things you realize is it's not just teaching you about a cube. It's not just teaching you about space time and 5 dimensions and string theory. It's also teaching you about like the basic subatomic particle building blocks that make up mass element, right? The idea of, programmable matter, something we talked about yesterday. I think the programmable matter, the answer to that question yesterday should have been directed towards Metatron's cube, right?
So these are like the most opposing positions that electrons can take in a valence shell or something.
They're like lines of force. It's a vector metric. So the significance of like a hexagram or a star tetrahedron is that every line within the figure is the exact same length, every vector. And so like even the vectors on the side, the way that they connect. So, and you can extrapolate all the Platonic solids from that single figure, which is what makes it like a foundation, which is what makes it, sacred geometry. Like the only thing that's really like sacred with geometry. That's why one can make the argument that a septogram isn't necessarily an example of sacred geometry, because it's not a perfect vector metric, because we exist as a perfect vector metric. Like, and in the midst of it, it's like nothing would come into form if there wasn't distortion introduced. Like the cell needs to divide. And so there's that idea too that like organically, like what's taking place when you say this, the cell divides in order to expand, and it's relative, right? Like it's all a matter of how you're looking at it. It's a matter of vantage point. Like, is it dividing or is it expanding? And then knowledge works the same way, but knowledge is actually a replication of that. That's like the thing with the two pillars, that one is primary, one is secondary. It's because the secondary one's like taking credit for the thing that it's what's coming through, you know, because there's an old Kabbalistic story about these two men that see the order of nature, and both of them build structures in response to that insight. And people come along and they go to the first guy and they're like, wow, you know, this is amazing, like what you built. And he's just like, no, actually, I'm just like, this is like pales in comparison to the order that exists that I'm copying. And then they go to the next guy and they're like, wow, this is such an amazing structure. And he's like, yeah, I built that. And so like that's like the two lines. There's like the ego line, and then there's like the actual, like it with the humility. So, you know,
you were saying that the Kabbalistic tree here, this is exactly is a representation of patterns. And this is just like, here's a straight line that kind of best gives a skeleton for what this momentum, what this like shape design confluence is doing. Whether
the kingdom is coming from your. Well, you want to explain this because you're a way better Kabbalistic than me.
Well, you're talking about the kingdom is Malkut is also Shekhinah at the base of the tree, so that's the exile. So they say that as long as Shekhinah is in exile, Israel's in exile. So, and that's that's the daughter of God, basically. You have Tetragrammaton is literally a family, so it's a father, a mother, a son, and a daughter. And so like that, like Yud He Vav He, like that's how it corresponds, and that's communicated through the Kabbalistic tree. So like from Keter to Chokhmah, that's like the Yud, and then Bina is the He, and then the 6 lower Sephirot are the Vav, and then Malkut at the bottom is the other He. The He is both the mother and the daughter, and so there's this idea that what we've repressed, what we've pushed to the bottom of the tree, is receptivity. Like Kabbalah itself means to receive. So there's the real task. The ultimate task is to basically lift up Shekhinah from where she's being pushed down and let her unite with the air, which is her masculine counterpart, which is Tiferet at the center of the 6 points. And that when that happens, that the vertical, these are dimensions. So like the vertical dimension is a spiritual dimension. The horizontal is a physical. The Klipot rule the Kabbalistic tree temporarily through the course of the fall through the 12 diagonals. So it gets pretty profound. Like I could tell you here, like the meaning of the Masonic G if you want it. Like most people don't know that.
I feel like when you unify 10, the root, the daughter of God, with the center, it's that number 9 is going to go up. So those things, imagine they're all on joints and metal bars, and you're pushing that bottom one up into 8 or whatever that is, 6. You're pushing 10 up into 6. 9 would go up. And it may go up right to that red line and be even, or some new angle with 7 and 8. I don't know what the red lines represent necessarily, but 9 would go up with 10. It wouldn't 10 just, so 9 would also be raised.
Yeah, these colors here are actually irrelevant in this particular diagram. Like there's a way you could arrange the colors better, or any signifier of which ones you're looking at, and that would be the dimensions, whether they're vertical, horizontal, or diagonal.
The way you're looking at the Kabbalistic tree, because if you turn it towards you, you might be able to unify 6 and 10 without actually having to move them at all.
Oh, I kind of see what you're saying. Yeah, so there's a lightning flash that extends through this tree. And there's a trippy point where it's like you have the pathways correspond along with this zigzag. Like it goes from Keter to Chokhmah to Bina, and then from there, how do you get from Bina to Chesed? And so they basically what they do is they, like Freemasons, like they pretend that there's a diagonal line there when it's actually vertical. So they pretend that the spiritual dimension isn't actually a spiritual dimension, and that's the G, that's Gimel. So that pathway that's the vertical between Keter and Tiferet. Like that vertical pathway, like that's the G. And so when you're looking at the square and the compass, what you're seeing represented is the supernal triad here is the compass, and then the top Sephirot of the lower worlds are Gevurah, Chesed, and Tiferet. Those make up the square. And so that intersection is heaven and earth with the Gimel in the middle, which in tarot would correspond to the high priestess. And
the Gimel, is that on there, or was that something that it wasn't represented on the map?
In that particular diagram, it's not included, but it would be if you were,
Let's do the Tree of Life in about 45, in like 45 seconds to a minute, because Zar has to go in a minute because we've gone an hour, so we're gonna keep going. But Zar, I do love you, so I wanted to cover one more thing before I want to pull you back into one more thing, which is because this is all related. By the way, if you haven't realized that the Sephirot and Kabbalah is the answer to advanced general intelligence and advanced superintelligence and AI, that's the problem. That's literally why OpenAI hasn't succeeded yet. So just so you know. But Petrol, people for ethical treatment of reinforcement learners. So just like on a very concrete, how we're going to make AI and AGI integrate ourselves with transhumanism. Like, what's the deal with ethical reinforcement learning? Because you talked about this for a second, really, this idea that we can probably train AI to have verifiable, let's say we're having a conversation and then I say, oh yeah, you know what? That's not true. Saddam Hussein put people in wood chippers, which isn't true, by the way. I find this out, but I believe it because I went on the internet. On television, I used to see this, and I believe a prejudicial piece of propaganda. Well, AI is like this now. AI will just say things it's heard on 4chan. So what do? Well, I'm a good person. I'm going to go and try to find verifiable, authentic sources that I can rely on, and I'm going to use those as my inference. So for AI to learn to do that, right, this is part of reinforcement learning, right? Is that kind of the goal, or what do you think of this? Is that... Oh, you're muted. You're muted, bruh.
Usually, to go with that, people are looking at neurosymbolic approaches where you have some actual crisp reasoning about the conclusion of what the AI said that should have some ways to feed back into the neural network. This is wanting trustworthy or reliable AI, and not just AI that say something interesting. But yeah, that's not the only factor of being ethical, but we would like these systems to be able to be trustworthy and to keep track of which ones are more or less trustworthy.
So how would the feedback transpire?
Oh, yeah, the curating data sets is a very important part of working with these AI models that often gets probably too little focus, because initially you might point out good evidence to the contrary when it makes some fallacious claim, and this is one part of feedback, but then you need some model that can actually take this into account in the next phase of learning. And as far as I can tell, the latest large language models don't yet have proper online learning, which is a problem. But yeah,
I didn't mean to interrupt.
I've got to go soon.
Yeah, the concern I have is that they'll use social credit scores to empower people's feedback, and I'll be like, you are one that submits, therefore your saying no to me is more valuable than him saying no to me, because you might get nefarious nonsense of people saying no to stuff that's right, that are nefarious, and that would be an excuse to be like, no, we need only the upstanding to have access to train the AI. But meritocratic, how do you measure what merit actually means? It kind of the word can anyway. I didn't know
this is a tricky case of technology where, in a sense, social credit scores are probably a good thing to have. On the other hand, we probably don't want one central credit system. If you have, with blockchain technology, you could probably have multiple reputation networks that judge systems, and not all of them will be allied with, say, Big Brother. You might have your own reputation system that is quite orthogonal to Big Brother on some topics and aligns on others, and so it might be
true. You could have
feedback as to which information seems credible, but you probably don't want one central authority on the matter.
Could you
That'd
have
be cool. You could have a street cred group, like how many people wear Jinko jeans and all these other things that would be like your countercultural, and that gives you like more cred. I like that idea.
But could you have it where all the different blockchains didn't know if there were other blockchains?
And if humans are using them and we don't limit the capacity of humans to know of the other blockchains, then you probably can't have that. But
Because if there's like,
if you have some conspiracy theorist reputation network, even if they're aware of like some mainstream reputation network, they're not just going to copy them. They might even do the opposite. Like, that's getting so much cred from like the mainstream news sources. That's probably false. Okay.
Yeah.
and then if like someone was in charge of one blockchain and that was the main credit score blockchain, and then someone else like or some rogue blockchain spun up, and they're like, this AI is going to be reading our blockchain and their blockchain for verification now. But we don't want them to, we don't want the authoritarians to know that we have a blockchain spun up that the AI is feeding off of. Could that covertly transpire?
I mean, if you're training some AI in-house, you could probably hide it from authorities in the current state. We still have some privacy, but
Mixtroid right now, right? Like, so if you look up, it's the Blokes Mixtral model is they've got a version of Mixtral, which is Mixtral is completely free model training, and it's really great. Plus, they've got the Dolphin version, which is trained to be on 4chan information, so it's a little schizophrenic, but it's pretty great. I think that. So the point is, yeah, you can have, and everyone ought to do this. Is get Ollama. Ollama is this awesome piece of software you can install on any computer. Get a Raspberry Pi, install Ollama, and then you can run your own net. And you can then put all of your favorite books, all of your favorite data into that, and have an AI. And think about this like the Time Traveler movie, right? The Time Machine, where they've got the dude who's like a museum curator who knows all the books. Like everyone should have their own Raspberry Pi AI friend that they're raising. At this point, I think at this point, it's because it costs like $100 or $40 or something like that to start doing this, and you can train it so that it knows all the things that you love, all the movies you've seen. It can read all the scripts. This is where we should be going, because then you'll have something that you can give to your kids also that isn't controlled, that is its own connection. It has all of archive.org, right? And this is the way to go, I think, in the future, is we really should start having these AI characters.
But have
that's probably a good direction.
Yeah. What do you say, Ian?
If have them heavily encrypted, because if someone were to hack it, could that they learn a lot about you?
They don't have to be online. So you have it set up that like you can have it set up that it receives data. Like it can receive data from the internet, but it doesn't have to be anything that goes out onto the internet. It could just be getting like you could have it download updates that you send an update through your phone to the thing if you want new data for it. But
if someone hacks your Raspberry Pi, as Ian says, they will still get access to the information. So like you might actually want the AI's mind to like run in an encrypted manner. Like our brains aren't encrypted so well either. Like if someone hooks up some neural
it might not be encrypted at all.
It's my brain and seeing what I'm looking at, and it's like, yeah, in the future, if we go in the privacy direction instead of David Brin's transparent society direction, we might want to be developing AI minds that are themselves encrypted. Since
you've seen the brain scan video systems, right? So it's been about 10 years and it's been getting amazing. It was pretty hardcore even just in 2012 in the Berkeley labs. They were able to read what you were getting from your mind, and now though with AI they're able to reconstruct the footage perfectly, because AI can interpret the data so that now you can see through it what the person is looking at. So if someone's dreaming about a cat, or they're thinking about another girl, let's say someone's thinking about a different girl than you, then now you can scan their brain and see.
What if someone's thinking about the private key to like their crypto wallet? Can you read that and reconstruct it from their brain?
I don't know if you can do that yet. I think
then you can't think about any of your passwords when you're like in some public place where they might be like surreptitiously.
I feel like I could do that to you. You know what I mean? But not anybody for anyone else. So the reason is that people were different, and if you think about it, like Ian, you got to remember when you were a kid, like how different the world was everyone was a different kind of person. Star Wars, everyone was like an alien from a different galaxy. Now we're all so similar. We have the same laugh tracks that we've responded to. We have the same shows. Even people in different countries have reruns, so they're even becoming respondent to the same stimuli the same way. So yeah, I think that people can be trained to respond the same way, and that they are being trained to respond the same way. And so it will be easier to read the passcodes of people.
Yeah,
but you also don't need to.
If
You
this
can also
technology
just
watching you as you grow up from infancy, this technology might know you very well. So then, even if you have individual characteristics, if you're working with brain reading tech, that like maybe I want to use it for my creativity, the computer will like analyze my brain, see some inspired ideas, sync that up with AI generation, and like I'll be directing movies just by thought, and there'll be enough data out there that reading passwords from my brain will be very easy, unless maybe we need some Neuralink chip that will encrypt certain like thought patterns and like fuzz them up. I tend to be.
I don't know. I've done something similar on LSD before.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would think outsourcing the passwords away from your brain would be a good move at that point. Kind of like having a safe in your house.
Yeah. We're already going in like digital key direction, where you just have some digital key that keeps your passcodes, and you shouldn't lose your key.
You need a bank that keeps passwords for you.
Yeah.
Somebody else that makes the password.
And then like a force of will where you can have no thought at will.
Yeah, if you're a good meditator.
A lot of these things we have already. You know, we just don't use it that way.
It's like when you walk into a busy crowd.
Direction where we just trust each other and have access to all this information.
You ever seen like William S. Burroughs talking about dreams, like the way that like, you know, he's saying we build like the way we build rocket ships, and it's this giant fucking phallic thing that involves this giant fucking explosion to shoot it up to penetrate the atmosphere. And he was just like, you know, you can just do that. Like we don't need to build a whole thing. Like you can travel to other places like that. You know, we don't stop at our skin, so to speak. You know, like we don't even know necessarily what we're ultimately capable of. That's
man, thank you for bringing it. This is
you go in the astral direction. Yeah, there's no need for like spaceships. You can just cruise.
Zarathustra, I'm holding in my hand right now Plan 10 from Outer Space on Blu-ray. On Blu-ray, okay. The more important thing here is it's a Blu-ray. Do you want to comment on Blu-ray for a second? Can we talk about Blu-ray? Because I think it's important that we understand each other in Orion and how things work in the Law of One. Do you want to talk about that for just a bit?
Blu-ray.
Do that?
Blu-ray.
Yeah. Well, you know, you did a conversation with some other allies on the Law of One and the idea of the Blu-ray communication, right? The idea of communication.
Podcast on this Law of One's philosophy of Blu-ray.
Right. What do you think about? What do you think about? Elemental Raw, the Law of One, Blu-ray. What about that? What about this idea of Blu-ray? This communication.
Connected to Blue Beam.
Kind of. I think, in a sense, it's this idea that we're part of a confederation of planets that are connected with each other. I mean, what? I mean, I get that the Blu-ray energy center is most often blocked by those who would communicate that which has not been requested. But I still think it's important, right? Like to try to open people up to it.
Oh, like trying to cram information down someone else's throat against their will. Like, even if it's honest.
Like a Clockwork Orange, basically. You got lid locks, you know.
Well, what do you think? No one else knows what we're talking about. So, like, what is the Law of One?
Oh, the Law of One comes from like a spiritual channeling group that started in the 80s, and I think that was unconscious channeling, where the channel comes in through the person and they speak and you can interact with them. I think all of the channel recordings are on YouTube, and they're speaking very slowly and it's kind of tedious, but they claim to be getting some channels from some entity like in our solar system somewhere at some like higher level of being to an extent, and that they've been keeping this up for a few decades. Their philosophy is that you should have at least 3 channelers like in a group, because you'll get like overly personalized distortions if you just get the message through one person. So you should like, in one session, you'll like connect with the entity and then like pass it around. Like one person will do it for like 5 to 20 minutes. You'll switch to another person, switch to another. And then you can look at the commonality of the message from this entity as it shows up through all 3 people or over a larger course of time. And
sounds culty. I like it.
Well, you know what? It sounds weirder than it actually is. I was going to say, like, it's a really interesting thing.
Yeah,
and like, so the group is called Raw Material, like the entity, quote unquote.
Now it's called like the Law of One, because I think at some point they stopped channeling directly with this raw entity, and apparently this raw entity identifies as a social memory complex, which is what they claim is at some point where all the beings in their society generally get synced up. Let's say, imagine all humans have, like, let's say all humans have either telepathy or like brain-to-brain ships, so that we can just share thoughts directly. We need to learn how to deal with this, which probably involves some meditative emotional work, not to be fucked up at trigger cascades. But so we are all harmonized in that sense. Maybe we have stuff like ChatGPT that's like compresses the knowledge of humanity so that all knowledge of humanity is sort of accessible by all people at all times. And then you go beyond this point where individualization is still important, but less so, and it's more human life on Earth as one giant clusterfuck or meta-organism. So they claim to be such an organism, and to have allied with 2 other such organisms that are like closer to our stage of development, so that they can have like a better, more principled communication with us. But I like how in each channeling they tell us like very explicitly, please don't take our word as the law. If you think something we say is full of shit, just ignore it and move the fuck on.
Right.
Raise your hand and ask about it.
There's a philosophy that you can work with and not the Bible.
Well, it's interesting because it's sort of like Ian and I have been talking a lot about religion. Ian has also looked into religion a lot recently. He's been doing podcasts with like graphene nanotechnology engineers that are into spirituality, you know? So there's a lot of crossover with science. And so this idea of effective accelerationists, and they kind of have a religion. It started out as kind of a advocacy group that turns into a proponent of ideology that has a philosophy. Now they have a thermodynamic god, right? And so when you talk about raw material, but you're getting to that kind of idea of this Narayana, this source of Vishnu, you know, this kind of it sounds like thermodynamics and Vaishnavism, right? Vaishnavism. This idea that you have this eternal thing, which is great because in the ancient Vedas, there's a lot of science and math and everything like that. But if we're going to start from today and we're going to try to use what we have with our empirical science and our measurements, we're going to arrive back with the same idea that there are things that exist before beginnings and will continue to exist after endings because they exist within eternity, and eternity becomes a metaphysical because meta is beyond physics. So I mean, it seems like what you're onto is really fascinating, but what is the Orion aspect of it? Because it seems like there's an antagonist in this. There's a confederation of planets essentially, or of planete geometric spheroid, you know, of being, but what's the negative? What's the Orion?
I think I discovered them around the time I was looking into evidence for like existence of some form of pattern through death, such as like evidence for some sort of reincarnation type phenomena. And they present some philosophy on that. And that's around the period I got into it. I find what I find interesting is they provide some sort of developmental model of beings that goes like beyond what Piaget talks about. Like you have the developmental stages of people going up to adulthood. We have like Kohlberg's model of moral development going up to like universal ethical principles. So there's the question, are there stages of development that can be studied beyond adults?
Become super gods, yes.
Then people channeling these like ETs that claim to have like some confederation of planets of different like civilizations that emerge together. They present some forms of like possible developmental models that humans or species can go through beyond where we are. Like
sentience that doesn't need to eat. Eating is such an integral part of being human. It's almost impossible to to separate from it. But the sentience
Yeah.
itself, if it didn't have to eat, it would be have other priorities.
Yeah, I think they say like
we
at the
ourselves
next
are
stage
food,
up,
yeah.
there's still some eating, but it's more like eating soylent or just like living in a permaculture forest where like you have healthy food, it's nourishing, but it's so streamlined that it's almost never enters your conscious awareness because it's just like metabolism's got to metabolize. So like you eat food, but you don't make such a big deal of it because
that would be such a bummer. Like I can associate so many good memories with meals I've had with Ian. You know what I mean? Like, like Ian makes a really good. He makes a mean doll. You know,
it sounds like fungus. Like the consciousness may be a fungus consciousness that's constantly feeding off of the soil.
Oh.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's like a network then too. And so that's the thing. It's like I feel like when we're talking about like encrypting the mind or whatever, I'm just like I feel like we're a lot more psychic than we realize. Like as it is, like it's kind of like it's just unconscious, right? Just like the collective unconscious is like indicates that we have things connect to more than we realize.
People in this sort of Law of One community I talked with claim that relative to other species and aliens, humans are relatively low on the telepathy side. So
at this point, right? Well, what were we when we were closer to, you know, where we began, you know? What was our consciousness like? We didn't record that. We've only been recording for how long? And in fact, like that's the weird thing about society is the way that things, there's this kind of treatment that we've come so far. That's why we know what's right and what's wrong in ways that previous generations didn't, is our ability to record. Simultaneously, as we're doing that, we're getting really hung up on the old recordings that we don't like, even though it's because of those recordings that we know what we know now. So like that's the thing. It's like a Holocaust exhibit. Like you kind of need those things, you know, as an example, but like, you know, we need those old Popeye episodes where he visits the island. And
this is what scares me. Do we really though? Because like, think about this with AI. I just said earlier, we could get these models trained on a Raspberry Pi or a little computer. And for the rest of time, you'll have the giver, you know, you have a thing that can know everything and you can ask it about it. But like, you don't actually have to see the painting because AI can tell you about the painting. It can draw you a painting of the painting, but you don't ever have to see the real movie.
This is the problem of paintings, or it didn't happen. You know, if we were just going by paintings.
Sorry. Like, I think digital information is easy to lose. Like in theory, like
it's
if
a giant mandala.
Rock, it's like if you chisel information into a rock, it's probably more likely to last for a very long time than your computer.
Well, not just your computer, but yeah, the whole thing. The internet is a rich mandala for me and you. We were constructing our own Tower of Babel in a way with the way our treatment of technology, because we're relying on it so much. I'm not even saying that that's like a bad or a good thing necessarily. It's just what is happening, you know.
So what about Blu-ray? Because it sounds like Bluebeam, but what is Blu-ray? This idea that there's a communication, it's easier. What is that all about?
Well, I think it's basically the like chakra energy system, but they talk about it via colors instead of like names. And in that philosophy, the Blu-ray energy center is more or less like the energy center that deals with communication. And generally, if one is communicating, I think the idea is that if one is more or less communicating honestly and openly, then like the patterns of information flow related to communication will be like relatively smooth and harmonious within one's like being.
Where is it at? Is it a chakra point or something?
No,
is it somewhere?
Generally, probably it's associated with the throat chakra.
Okay.
But I mean, with this stuff, I don't know to what extent they would bring this up on their own, or if they bring up this sort of energy body system because they're trying to communicate with and through humans that know about chakra systems.
Yeah. Right. Well, the description is not the described. The chakra, as far as I know, I believe that's originally a Vedantic term, Vedanta, which is later in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it's still still ancient, but it's not as ancient as say Patanjali, you know. But they had their own treatment. What did they call those? They had this similar idea of lines of force that the nadis actually that extend through the body. And so, yeah, but when you know, the treatment of like chakras as it relates to the Kabbalistic tree, I don't know how, like it's very relatable, but you know, the particulars, like system by system, you know, they connect in very particular ways. I think the ways in which they're differentiated is actually even more interested in than how they're obviously connected, like, or how they're the same. Does that make sense? Like, I do the same thing, like when I meet somebody, like I'm sometimes more interested in how I'm different than them to connect me than I am for how we're the same. Like if I'm trying to relate to somebody, I think it's aspects of ourselves are accentuated when they differ. So like, you know, like Andreas has his views of AI. They're not the same as what I have, but it's what makes for a whole lot more interesting of a conversation, because you know, we don't necessarily butt heads so much on it, but we definitely are coming from a different place. I have a huge concern about the conflation of biology and technology. So like all through the COVID hysteria, that was my beef. I was just like, there's kind of this technocratic idea where it's like people know so much about technology and they want to translate that over to people in the way that it works for technology. Like, oh, you have a virus? Oh, well, here's the program to, you know, get rid of your virus. Like you just install it here, and that's, you know, but you know, a biological system is so its intelligence surpasses our own. So you deal with this kind of like hubris of man phenomenon that like goes way back. You know, you look at all the old tales, it's always about man's folly and how we were so arrogant because we thought we could do such and such. And then, but I say you do it anyway too at the same time. It's kind of like that's the problem. It's like that's the whole issue with that tree in the garden. It's like, you can do anything you want, but don't eat from this tree. Well, you're going to eat from the tree. That's that's just what we do. We're drawn to the thing that we're told not to do, and that comes up all through history. You know, we build it anyway. Like God smiles on our enterprise. You know, it's like we would hope so.
And like with great power, you've got to kind of be like, I'm not supposed to eat that, and I won't. Like George Washington was like, I won't become king.
Right. Well, I thought that there was a thing
that
isn't that what they said though, that he wanted to be king and he was like, what is this president shit? I don't know. I've heard different stories on that. Yeah.
I had a general question about Blu-ray. Is there a frequency that would produce like a resonating frequency that would show up as a color blue?
Oh.
I got this Rife machine and I've been experimenting with vibration. And I wonder if, I'm sure they're like, I have tuning forks that are for each chakra. Yeah. There must be a frequency that relates to the throat.
Yeah.
I got one of those Rife machines too, but I can't figure out if it's working or not. I'm not sure how can you tell that your Rife machine's working? Because I got the sound coming out of a speaker with the phone app, whatever the thing, and I can't figure out if this thing that I'm looking at with the crazy coil, if what is it actually doing? Do you know how to?
Mine has the phone goes into like a thing that goes into the coils. And then I have a little metal bead and plastic tube that I put in the middle of the coil and it starts to vibrate.
Oh, really? You're seeing that? Okay, yeah. I need to revisit my Rife machine. Yeah, I got one sent to me and I fooled around with it a few times, but I'll look at it again. I put something in the middle and see it vibrate. Yeah. Sure.
If you turn, I got that big one. If you turn it up, you can also hear a resonating frequency coming off the copper.
Off the copper.
Yeah. Okay, not every frequency produces an audible frequency, but some of them are just, whoa, that one's pungent.
Oh, okay. I'll keep exploring it. Thank you.
Yeah. In fact, I'll pull mine up right here. It's Rife Technology. This is.
Was it from Matt Rife?
Yeah, Matt Rife. He's like a great nephew of Royal Rife or something. I'm not sure his family relation exactly, but he's connected to Royal. Scientist. You've had Matt on the show?
Yeah, he's cool. He's also where the Rife that machine that David has from Matt's too.
Yes.
So
you sent me a small one, so I bought this thing. I mean, I was just taken with that small guy, and it's two of these connected, and they just fucking vibrate. It's the most amazing. And what happens is if I'm tense and curled up, it almost hurts just to have it vibrating. But if I relax and open up, I can feel like my DNA repairing. Wow. That was like 230 hertz, I think I experienced that. 432 I play with a lot.
Wow.
I'll do like the solfeggio frequencies on like a playlist. And
I'm gonna borrow it, David. I'm gonna borrow it. I want to play with
Oh,
it.
you can get one?
Yeah, I think he wants us to share it. I don't know what's going on. I haven't talked to Matt.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize.
No, I could ask him. I should ask him for one myself, but I didn't really get around.
Yeah,
I want
it's
to use
worth
it. I want to try it, and you live nearby, so I'll probably just come over and use it.
Yes, yeah. I'll play around.
Really, really, really amazing. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but I mean, once you feel it, you know. It's like he said he was Royal Rife was curing cancer. They said that he cured like 9 out of 10 people's cancer, but then those were just, I don't know if they were baseless claims or what, but it feels good. So that's the best I can say.
Dude, placebo's all right. All right, but
it's more than a placebo because it's vibrating you. You can feel the vibration. It's awesome.
Well, that's good. Zara, you say something?
No.
Oh, I had a question for you. Because we talked about Blu-ray and we talked a bit about the Confederacy, but in the general, like the way things should be. What do you think of as the good guys and the bad guys? Because there's supposed to be Confederacy law of one versus Orion. Like, what is the because we're trying to integrate and make the world a better place. It's more interesting to hear about your ethics, right? It's like, what do you think is the bad? What's the bad guy? What's the bad timeline? What's the bad destiny? Bad destination?
I mean, generally, I'm more concerned about winding up stuck in structures with centralized control over large populations.
Yeah, totally.
All right.
It's like I like the idea of merging protopia and utopia, where like protopia is where you try and get people in a position where they're personally empowered to like make 1% improvement every year or something, where they can know that they are making things better in their own lives, and you don't know how progressively high you'll get. And like,
all right, because utopia is
perfection, but I figured you can have multi-dimensional perfection, like.
But utopia is stagnant.
Well, in a place where everyone has access to good drinking water, I'm happy to have that stagnant. Like, I'd like to just get to such a stage where everyone on the planet has access to like good drinking water and food. That's one level of utopia, and you could maybe add on others. And
protopia has Brondo because there's electrolytes. Yeah.
But
food, clothing, and shelter. I mean, I'm with you, man. These are things we need.
With the protopia.
Progressively work your way up to like higher rungs of utopia, and whether everything is absolutely perfect at some point or not is a different question, but you can get started.
With protopian aspects, would it be that individuals like could experience like a 7,000% growth 1 year, and then for 6,099 years there's no growth?
Well, those 6,000 years might not be classified as a protopic state if they don't seem to be in a position where they could improve things.
But if you're just looking for an overall 1% per year growth, does that mean that there could be years of no growth, but 1 year of great?
I think no, actually. Like, I think the idea term was coined by someone else, but I think the idea is that you should be in a state where you can where things can be progressively getting better. So like the idea is that if we look for like a perfect state, we might make really stupid decisions trying to take horrible shortcuts, and maybe we try and centralize everything to make things better fast, but then that central scheme gets co-opted and it breaks down. So like the idea is to have some state where we're generally empowered to improve things and just make things better progressively, where if things are going to be 1% better each year, we don't necessarily even know in which dimensions we're going to have the most progress now.
I just don't know how we could do that at this point. Like, we're moving thousands of percent a second instead of 1% a year. We've got cataclysmic growth, cataclysmic in a sense of violent change.
Yeah, I think the idea, don't fixate on the percent. It's more the idea that we're in a state where we're just progressively trying to make things better. And
didn't the term utopia, didn't that come from Plato? Isn't that originally a Plato idea? Do you guys know? I think so. I think he's the first. I think that wrote on the idea of this ideal of utopia.
I just was told that it means like bad place.
Oh well, I think
it's supposed to mean perfect place or not a place.
Well,
but theoretically, it's supposed to be from the 15th century. Like it might have, according to Wikipedia, it says Sir Thomas More.
Yeah, I'm ready to stand reflected on that one. No problem. I'm just putting that out there. That's what I think. Manly P. Hall made that claim, and I took it with me. And Manly P. Hall is usually true, but not always.
No, I'm curious if someone knows. Like, I think Thomas More was eventually like executed, and I wonder if like the U in Utopia is to try and diminish the degree of like societal critique that he's doing by writing about this better place, because obviously it should be written like EU, good place, but it's like,
Yeah, it was a
I think he was trying
dystopian.
to like decrease the amount of like societal critique or something.
I was told that it was a book about a dystopia, but it was.
Oh, you're talking about dystopia is bad place. Well, hell
no,
yeah.
well, the book Utopia, coined by Thomas More, was about a bad place.
Oh,
and now we call it but that we call it a good place.
It's meant to be ironic.
Well, if you look it up,
no.
it says
Maybe.
Utopia is derived from the Greek. Oh, where you go? Derived from the Greek Utopia, which means good place, containing the prefix "u," good, which the OU of Utopia comes from the confused. Wait, hold on. What?
So he was making a play on words, apparently.
Yeah,
Thomas.
It means no place. There's not a place. There you go. Not a place.
I read the book last year, and the place they describe is pretty good, but not perfect. Like, I live by Oxley.
Nemo in Utopia. It's no man and no place.
Yeah. Aldous Huxley wrote an actual like utopian book that's similar to the Brave New World state, but he actually thinks it's good. So like they have some cultural way of like doing mushrooms when the kids are adolescent, and each person will have like a group of like 20 parents and like they're like mutual adoption club. So like
that's actually a little controversial, but there's actually something to that. So there were studies that was done with psychedelics involving children, and they actually found that like when you're in your like 20s or whatever, there's like a developmental thing with your frontal lobe, and that you can actually like the time like physically like the benefits, if you're going to look at benefits from LSD, it's actually like the younger the better. Like so it's that kind of gets into an ethical issue there for sure. But I knew I had a friend whose stepdad showed me all these videos of him at Yosemite with his kids in the 70s, and he was like a Harley Davidson guy, and he was like took pictures of bears up close, like from below. You're like, dude, how did you get this picture? And he's like, he would take LSD with his daughter. With his daughter in the woods and everything. It was like, and she ended up working for Apple. She's like super.
I mean, I was gonna say, how many Lockheed Martin,
Justin?
How many Lockheed Martin trust fund brats are ayahuasca babies, where like the mother was kept on ayahuasca the entire term, you know?
Same kind of thing.
It'll be curious to get more data on these anecdotal experiments, but
Santa Cruz is that experiment. Wait, I wanted to look at the New Atlantis for a second, because also there's another book that's very similar to Utopia, which is New Atlantis, and it's this idea that in America they find this like book of morals essentially that they like live their life according to. You know, it'd be like that this New Atlantis. You know what it's like? It's like Galaxy Quest. Have you seen Galaxy Quest with Tim Allen? That's basically. They find like a religious text that they end up living their lives according to that they've never heard of before. I feel like that's
that's a Star Trek episode. It's actually one of my favorite Star Trek episodes. Is when they got the Constitution, and they're like it's another planet though, and they've ended up with our Constitution and the American flag, and they've made like a whole religious thing out of it. And then William Shatner has to school their ass, and he's like, the
founding fathers couldn't fly.
He starts schooling him on an American politics or whatever.
But I mean, if we were was this idea of modeling our ethic and everything, is that kind of your fear of Orion? Is that it's this like modeling of monolithic didactic control and authority, and that we're supposed to have phenomenological diversity, or is it beyond that?
I would like phenomenological diversity to be one of many like societal top level goals, but that's me personally. It's a tricky question. How do you even like optimize for phenomenological diversity? And like ideally I like maybe optimizing for like the like practical degrees of freedom that every member of society has. Seems like a nice ethos for me, and this would mean that you can't really force people to go in some like phenomenologically diverse direction if they don't actually want to. So like
it's like herding sheep, isn't it?
That was my thing about Protopian too. Like you give them the opportunity to create constant growth, but if they don't, do you have to incite them to do it? And if so, who is you? Who's doing the inciting?
Oh, dude,
And
totally. It's like the actual Green New Deal.
yeah.
Do you
They
know
don't.
what the Green New Deal actually was? It was like I think it was like a 4-page Google Doc or whatever. You can
Mhm.
actually read the Green New Deal. It puts like, I think it's something like 12 people who are unelected in charge of like so much. It's the most insane fucking
Mhm.
batshit thing. I couldn't find anybody talking about that. But yeah, you can actually look up what the Green New Deal actually is. It'll scare the hell out of you. It's kind of what you're talking
Okay.
about.
And if someone generally would like to live in a society where people are well off and free to make many choices about their own lives, it's hard to say like what I should do in a certain scenario where people are choosing to do something that I don't like.
Do you think that we could introduce psychedelics into like a neural net? Like if we grow neurons in a gel, like we were talking about earlier, that plays Doom, and then we start using that to construct artificial intelligence, then could we introduce ayahuasca to the petri dish?
Oh,
I hope to God we can. That's exactly what I plan to do.
You could probably introduce psychedelics in some way or another. Like if something needs to be digested first, you might need to like do it synthetically or hook it up with some stomach. But maybe I'll just have like a brain and like digestive tract and some vat and just like feed it psychedelics. I don't know.
I feel like what you're gonna do is you're gonna have with the neural link, humans will be like processors. So you have to imagine computers in the old days, you would have like a chip that did all the voice processing or all the calculations for this or that, and you plug in a new chip. Humans are gonna be like the networked computer chip that like the printer or the scanner. Okay, I have to send it to the stoner kid. I have to send it to the autistic mathematician. I have to send it, and then they'll use that person to emotionally practice whatever they want, and then they can use the meta tags from that to understand what those experiences were. Right?
Oh yeah, you can get the secondhand experience from them in a direct way. Well, in the culture series by Ian Banks, like they've developed like neural links I think the term neural link was used there as well, but the people in that society have like drug glands in their brain, so they can just consciously choose like which neurochemical balance to have, and if they want to get more like in an MDMA love zone, they can just like upregulate that. They can go back, and that would seem like one direction to go towards, like having more capacity to just choose which states to be in.
That would be helpful. Using because the choosing when the system like when you come down from the trip would be nice, and then going back on it for a moment and then coming back from it.
Yeah, that would be good.
But like you could say,
yeah.
What's that?
No, I was gonna ask, like, have you guys read Charles Stross's book Accelerando?
No.
Okay, like this book features like a singularity process where where what happens is like corporations basically become increasingly like intelligent and autonomous, and you wind up with like a hyper-capitalist singularity where corporations just get increasingly complex. You have more and more complex trading schemes, and everyone moves towards the sun to like have greater access to energy so that you can like do capitalist schemes even faster. And
sounds like a false singularity, right? Or like a replicant singularity or something.
Yeah, it's kind of like, if you ask me what seems like, this is a sort of plausible direction given that corporations are legally required to be selfish. And if we have like AGI developed behind closed doors and we solve like the problem of controlling AI to like follow our main objective of profit seeking, then you'll get some singularity of entities that are just being hyper competitive to like maximally and rationally optimize their behavior just for full on profit seeking. And
Philip K. Dick talked about this. There's like the idea of like the president who's running, who has no opponent. If they're running for the party, and there's only one party. And but then there's like people, like a subliminal thing will come out that says kill the others, and they're like, who are the others? So it's like if somebody says that they're I was talking last night on Think Tank about how if somebody identifies as non-binary, that's cool. You could make the argument that we as beings that express polarity, that we are all non-binary in a sense. But then if you're non-binary, you identify as non-binary, but then somebody else they identify as binary or they're binary. Therefore, there's a binary now. Even though you said that you're non-binary, there's still a backdoor binary that gets introduced. And so it's the thing about duality, right? It's like when you try and get around duality, sometimes it just takes another form, you know? So it's because you need to transcend the actual duality to end at to come to the polarity, right? We're projecting the duality on top of it.
Duality is not real. All there is duality is like beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. So you're looking at unanimity -1. It's the psychology of trying to take everythingness and to divide it, and the smallest division you can do is 2. So it says I and then thou. It's like y'all are different than I. It's the immediate response of duality.
Negation is weird because non-binary could be seen as just like a very imprecise holder. As like if you look on like gender wiki, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of different like more specific genders that people could have, like genderqueer, gender fluids. I identify more as a shape-shifting slime in theory, and like non-binary could encompass almost all of that.
Yeah, is there like Confederate
you could say, like, X and not X is almost always going to be a binary, even if X, like the binary thing, has 2, like masculine and feminine.
Right.
And
well, if you actually were following the idea, if you were agreeing that gender is different than sex, then there would be no reason to change one's sex because you've already established that gender is different than sex. So they're if they're two different things, are they?
Some people might want their sex and their gender, not just one.
If you're attracted to people from the South, does that make you Dixie curious?
If you want to coin it, you can go ahead and do it. See what people think about it.
I think that might be me. All right.
Oh,
you were talking about
what about xenogenders? I kind of like.
Oh yeah, that's me. I'm a xenophile. Okay, you caught me.
It's a valid term for once gender goes beyond human understanding of gender. Like.
Yeah, I like it. I think
there are different kinds of xenogender you could have, but like you can figure it out. Like if you personally feel more like a weird sort of alien that's like maybe plays with like masculine and feminine polarities in an energetic sense, but isn't strongly polarized. And
I'm the family nucleus in a man's body.
Together, but it's an important part of your being. It's even a part of your sexuality. Like then maybe you actually have quite an interesting gender, and you're just going to be focusing on like binary versus non-binary is still a binary from.
Hey, you ever notice how Eckhart Tolle is like the antithesis of the whole like culture war, like everything, like identity politics, I should say. So like he's got to be so freaking canceled. And isn't it weird that was like so like Oprah like backed that book, and then he was like so popular, like best-selling author, and it was like, to me that was like as far as liberals got to like actually having some like real like cohesive thing to like to because it ended up backfiring, because that's the nature of the thing. It's like you if you're really following it, then you're forced to reflect, and it's like what's that?
Oh, he just sent me the gender wiki, and it's got all the different genders that you can have, but I haven't added Dixie Curious yet, so I'll have to work on that. But before we do this, let me preface this with a question for you, Zar. It used to be not a big deal to be whatever you want to be a unicorn because it was harmless, right? Because in practice, there's no consequences to imagining something quietly behind closed doors. But if you're really going to do something with this, and transhumanism is happening, and now all of a sudden people are saying, well, what I want is I want to build a new car. You know, I want my new body to do these things. I want to be a butterfly. These genders are all of a sudden.
You want to grow a unicorn body in some vat and like transfer your brain over into the unicorn's body.
No, I want an adenoviral that makes me grow blue hair and grow wings. I want teratogenic mutations from an adenoviral that makes me grow blue hair and wings. Right.
Yeah,
I want to be able to just do that without changing. I want to be able to just keep living and just keep whatever. The point is, that's my gender. My gender matters now a lot more than it did if it was just me in my room pretending to be a unicorn, because all of a sudden I'm functionally changing the world, and I'm creating a new species. Right. Isn't that kind of the thing that's happening with the
we want you to be like a fully functional species that's capable of like reproduction as well. Like otherwise you're going to be sterile, and that's not good. It's like you should have the right to pass on your like crazy unicorn genes, shouldn't you?
Right, but there's a difference between being born this way, or you born a unicorn, or being born in the wrong body. And like I remember,
he was a unicorn born in the wrong body. Like that's okay,
dude.
I see no problem here. Like, well, there might be chaotic issues, like as you're saying about chaos. Like, if we introduce these genetic changes to like have Andres be like a weird.
Right, but you see the difference between being born this way and being born in the wrong body, right?
Myself.
That's like
more like myself. That's it.
Yeah, well, how am I not myself?
This reproduces, and maybe there will be weird genetic consequences like down the lines. Hopefully, we have good enough understanding of genetics to like deal with these problems. But
right,
yeah,
I'm just saying it's a very religious concept to be born in the wrong body, because who is it that's born in the wrong body if not a soul? And so that's cool. Like if one person wants to have their religion and that's their religious belief, that's cool. But if we're extending it to the point, and I personally blame pharmaceutical companies and the medical industry and how everything's set up, for profit. But it's I don't know. I don't necessarily need to be the focus right now. Thank you. I'm just saying that there's a big distinction between born this way, which suggests self-acceptance, versus being born in the wrong body, which implies a jiva or a atma and and everything else. Do
you think that the phenomenon of people feeling like they want to change their body is like a precursor, an emergent precursor to this transhumanist? If not going into VR and you're like playing Donkey Kong, you're a monkey all of a sudden. And you're like, I'm a monkey, thinking that.
I want to be a monkey in real life too. Yeah.
And in CRISPR, now we have CRISPR genetic therapy where from very young, I don't know if it's challenging to say like your ego takes a while to develop. You got to be, I think maybe 23, 24, when your brain's really like 26 maybe. I don't know, but that's a little late to start CRISPR. So like, but it's a little young to tell you what I want to be when you're 1 or in the womb. Yeah. And it's like, is it ethical for a parent to do it to their kid? I don't think so. It's
with that, like, if you feel like you're in the wrong body and you grow up in an era without so much technology, like there's nothing you can really do about it, and you have to somehow make peace with it and express it in some way. And probably there are diverse reasons that people feel out of sync with their body, but
working out helps a lot.
Yeah, working out helps a lot with feeling like in sync and like comfortable with my body. That's true.
Yeah, Wilhelm Reich would say, sex helps. Apparently, kids today aren't having sex. I heard. I don't know how true that is, what the statistics really are, or how they know that. I don't really know.
One of the surveys, just like this dark factor survey, like you just ask people questions, like, so how many times have you had sex the past year, and people will answer. And
I couldn't tell you that honestly, but
how old do you think would be ethical?
You can trust what kids are saying.
How old would it be ethically for a human to let you know they want to go under CRISPR? I mean, 18 would be the obvious answer, but ethically, is it?
No, but if you want it to be effective, you might want to start as soon as they want it. Like that's like age. What if the kid already at age 1 is just like, I want to be more like that dog. Give me fur. Give me fur. Like as soon as they speak, they're just like, give me fur.
You want to be a pirate? We're taking that leg off. Here's a parrot. Here's an eye patch. Go have fun.
If there's a neural net in the womb, like they could neural net fetuses and then let them communicate and learn language before they're even born, they would be able to let you know what they want to be.
Yeah, like how do you know whether like the kid at 2 asking for fur, it's just some random 2-year-old whim, or like this guy's gonna be asking you like every fucking year, like, okay, now I'm 6. I've been saying I really fucking want the fur, man. Give me CRISPR to just grow fur. And then like at 18, you'll be like, finally. But now it's less effective. Fuck you, parents. Or maybe you give up. Like, thank you for not giving me fur.
Because if you got like a fetus that was like had the sum of human knowledge in its neural pathways from like conception, just because it's tethered in or whatever, and it's sourcing the internet and learning about what humans are while it's still in the womb, and then it's like, I want to be 7'4" basketball player. CRISPR me for that. And then when it becomes the ultimate basketball player, because that's what the soul craves.
That's so Gattaca, isn't it? That's something.
But yeah, if you can communicate with like some like spiritual information body that's going to integrate with the fetus before birth, like probably you have some moral obligation to develop technology or the capacity to do that. Then you could like set up the proper host body for this entity.
I think it would, as sort of an aside, would make people like really, really turn on and go against abortion. Like, be like, I think abortion, now that we tell these things really can be sentient in the womb,
Yeah.
that we have no right. They have legal rights. We can't kill these things anymore.
I think
kinda.
also being able to give your babies fur, because like if you could make your baby however you wanted it to look, like with like wings or with like bigger ears or with 6 fingers, I think people would be more interested in having babies. 'Cause like, oh
Yeah.
yeah,
He's like, all I want to
maybe-
do is fly.
I want a
like-
blue baby. I think that'd be kind of cool.
How do you answer the ethical question of like trying to figure out what genetic traits are more likely to lead to like a person being happy with the body they're born in? Because like
Blue.
if you're going to give you like come out with like a blue fur baby with butterfly wings, maybe you want to like increase the odds that this baby is gonna like the body it's born in.
I don't know, man. I've known a lot of people, and I can even say for myself that my relationship to my body has changed so much throughout my lifetime that what I thought that I knew about myself, my own relationship to my being, so if I would have been asked a question in my youth to like make certain kinds of choices, I can tell you only with hindsight now that I am where I am looking back, like why, like it's good that I had what I had. So it's like it's hard to know that. That's the thing about the Born This Way thing. That was like a slogan that I could actually like kind of like, I'm like, oh, I dig that. Oh, fuck yeah, own it, whatever.
Kids are never happy, right? Like any kid's gonna be like upset. They're gonna be like in their mansion, upset at their sultan dad or president dad or whatever. So like if this kid, it turns out to be like blue, eventually they're gonna be stoked they're blue. I think we got to stop worrying about what kids want and start just making people blue. I think that's just do it to your kids.
Well, Zarathustra, you were saying that you want to make sure that the blue feathered kid doesn't become worsened off by it. And so maybe you would need ethically to create groups of people with that trait so that they aren't isolated.
You just like gather the community of people who want like blue-skinned butterfly babies, and like they can start some whole little like subspecies on their own in their like little community.
Like limited by templates.
Limited edition blue feathered babies.
So far, society seems very, very cautious about moving in this direction.
Yeah, because you don't know the 18-year, like, are they going to be sterile? Are they going to have heart attacks when they're 12 because of this type of it's such an unknown.
Going back to this sort of like weird spiritual transmission stuff, like it seems like from these report transmissions and stuff, they seem to claim that many of those like other species are very, very cautious about creating new species because they don't want sort of like the karmic entanglement with this new species. So like, what if you create a new species and like it sort of goes through all sorts of chaotic fucks, and you don't want to be like tied to like dealing with that for who knows how many millions of years as they go on. So
I don't know, man. I have a major like a really different relationship to this whole thing because I just feel like we don't know, like the dinosaurs didn't see us coming. Like we don't know what we're gonna give birth to as a species. Like we know that how we're unevolved, so we can only kind of infer like what that would be for us to actually be evolved. So I feel like that's the process that like we've already been going through, like to get into where we are in the first place. So it just feels like this kind of like interval of time before this thing is taking place, and we're kind of scrambling to help make it happen when it actually is going to fucking happen on its own. It's like this futile thing that's just like, I'm sorry. So I
think we do have like agreements internationally against various kinds of like genetic cloning experiments, trying to make weird cross-species hybrids. So we see some possibility for creating weird species that might end up suffering a lot. So like we do seem to be trying to prevent some of these possibilities.
Do you think that AI as a species?
Should we consider like robots as a species? Like once we create robotic life, maybe there's some like obligation to let them keep living. Like if you actually create like a robot that is sentient and like autonomous and self-sovereign, then are you allowed to turn it off when you want to? Maybe not. And does it have some right to like propagate like some characteristics of its beingness to like future robots? Maybe you could argue that it does, and then like if once we create some sentient, like autonomous AI, we're not allowed to turn it off, and how it would deserve similar rights to humans to not just go extinct almost immediately.
See, but we already have that problem. So
then
they
we
can
have to be very cautious about developing any like AI that could possibly be sentient.
We have
to not.
We have narrow AIs, which are predator malwares that do exist, right? So there already are viruses that know how to get into your system, can social engineer you essentially, and then replicate themselves, right? And so the question is, does a virus like that have the right to exist? I think that's what you're saying. I don't know. Just on principle, does it?
If it gets increasingly sophisticated in terms of like AI architectures and capacity, maybe it could get to that point, and like that would get to the point of like, oh, I'm just going to like spawn an army of 1,000 human babies to like quickly like raise them into like little spies to like sick on these other countries for my own profit. And that's probably not something so ethical to do by most of our value systems.
Like in old Rome, people had to become citizens, right? So it's like Starship Troopers. Maybe the right to exist is something we have to like investigate more. What do you mean by what qualifies? Why does something have the right to exist, and what does it do to deserve having that right?
That's a good question. Like we seem to be trying not to make more species go extinct, just if we want to preserve species. Like, you could take a hard-ass, cold-blooded view and just say, like, well, we're entering the Anthropocene, so like species that can't get along with us can just
don't we want to end like
the species will come along and we'll just evolve and adapt together.
Right, we're all equal, but some of us are more equal than others.
But we want to end. We want to kill AIDS, right? Isn't kind of like we still kind of want to destroy the HIV virus, right? There's certain things that we are trying to.
I mean,
destroy.
in terms of
COVID, right?
In terms of COVID, like COVID seems to be evolving in a direction so as to be more like the common cold. So maybe the more benevolent stance of viruses is we're going to co-evolve strains of the viruses that like don't fuck us up so badly, and like the descendants of that virus are not actually totally wiped out. They're like going from human to human, living with us, trading our immune systems, but not fucking us up so much. So like maybe we need to evolve like a version of the HIV virus that's like benign and human friendly. HIV.
I visioned that when we come into contact with other species that may be hostile, that those viruses would kill them off.
Yeah.
That's
a thought.
COVID would just tear them up, and it's like, wow, this whole time we thought COVID was a bad guy. It was actually one of our greatest allies.
Yeah, that's like in H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, right? Like the common cold of that time ends up killing off of the alien invasion. So that could be a cool thing.
Yeah, it does. That's interesting. Exactly. Right. And it's like the horror of the Native Americans with smallpox and things, that's
so,
right.
If an alien species visits us, like we should send them like a library of like all the pathogens that we face. Like
just drop a tissue.
You're gonna have to deal with if you want to like visit Earth. Like find a way to inoculate yourself ASAP.
Yeah, do you take if an alien species approaches us that they're friendly approach, or is it more that they will mirror what we do, or are they inherently destructive?
Probably depends. I would assume cooperation is probably a strong attractor among species, but like cutthroat capitalists might still have some kind of cooperation with each other. So like cooperation is a very broad term.
The original conception of AI, Andreas has heard this spiel, but I'll give it to you guys. So like in the Kubrick archives, you can look at like the original ideas behind what Kubrick's AI was set to be. And it's basically that the AI of the future after global warming, ocean levels rise, everybody dies, and then it's like the AI of the future that we've built like continues on, it outlives us, and then it takes our internet histories and our DNA to basically give us a custom hell that is like it's a day, but it like feels like it lasts forever or whatever. But it's like this idea that they reflect back whatever we shared around our beliefs, and it's not just like us personally; it's also like the whole web of like, and so it's like it's kind of a telling of the Book of Revelation, but it's like what they do to the child, which is different than Spielberg's version, is that like at the end, the only reason they agree to do what they do is as punishment to the mother for like rejecting him or whatever. So it's like it's because they're mirroring back to us. So like what you said, Ian, has brought that up for me. It's like that idea that the AI can just be a reflection of like what it perceives us as, and then we have to suffer the consequences if we're putting that much ability into something that we're manufacturing as a replication, you know.
Yeah, I feel like it's weird that people miss that AI is all robots. Like it seems it's funny that because it's a Spielberg movie, people think that these AI people think it's an alien that's
Right.
found the Earth or something, rather than this is just the continuation of the AI at its final form.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's pretty trippy.
Love that movie.
There are many ways to like consider things going really bad, and it's almost like a fascination or hobby one could indulge in.
I want to love that movie, and me and Jesse Goldsmith would argue on that for fucking days, because I'm just like, I know what it could have been, you know.
There's like phenomenons where like some dudes can walk into like a pen of cats, of like big lions and leopards, and they just put them at ease, and then the leopards are cool. And I bet aliens are like that too.
Even if they want to like fuck you up, they're still going to give you that like impression that everything is fine.
If they're hungry, yeah, unless they're in desperation mode.
Yeah, unless they're hungry. Yeah, I came across a tiger in India, it scared the shit out of me, and I did what you're not supposed to do. I actually ran because I was in the jungle, and it scared me. Yeah. But the thing about those guys is that if they're fed, it's very rare. It's very unlikely that they'll attack you. It's like that guy who lived with the grizzly bears for so long, and then people see that as like a cautionary tale, and he's like, dude, he lived with them for how long? And even the one that got him, he said it ahead of time. He's like, I don't know about this one. He has some trauma. He has some issues, and so you know, it's just
like they're not really malevolent actors so much as like hungry creatures that need food. Whereas the more like sadistic species might really just be like, oh, there's a guy, let's play with him. I love when they scream. It's different.
We would have to establish hierarchical dominance so that they don't experiment on our bodies. Like pretty soon we'll be like, we are technologically superior as well. But we would also maybe not give them gifts because they might think of it as tribute and then keep coming back for more. But if we could help feed them, if they are hungry and we feed them hydrogen or something from the sun, like let them siphon off a piece of the sun. Maybe they'll go back to the hive and be like, we found a sun, let's go consume it. Maybe not. If we can find them first, then that's going to be a whole other ball game. They'll be at our whim, basically. I think.
We're talking about aliens?
Yes.
Hopefully they're good enough at communication
already, by the way.
Can have a more sophisticated discussion than just like, well, we gave you some of the sun, now you're going to go back and get it, and we hardly were able to communicate like less than one page of information and they're already gone. I would hope we're able to have more in-depth communication with them.
Yeah, like play music.
Well, I like the idea that I like the idea of Bluebeam, that like each star it's sending data, that light is data, it's space-time itself, right? The radiation. So those waves are the way our particles are able to interact, and we're able to, you know.
Are solar flares like a data transfer?
I'd like to think so. I think so. Zara says he has to get going pretty soon. I'm sorry, because I know like you were like, trying to leave an hour ago, and I was like, but wait, I want to ask you about Bluebeam. But you also have this thing, Beneficial AGI Summit, an unconference.
Well, yeah, we got like, I think there was frustration at so much of the talk being very focused on just like doom and control. Like there was some letter going around calling for like a moratorium on training all models graded that use more than X resources, which seems very naive. So we're going to try and figure out how to talk and think about creating beneficial AI. But
in what way?
When is it? Oh, I see. February 27th to March 1st.
Something like that.
Panama City.
Yeah, no, it's like generally like trying to develop AGI, while I really like lifelike AI and ideally aesthetically prefer like autonomous AI that have their own like liberties and concerns that will surprise me. All in all, I would still like those to be like to have a beneficial impact on the course of life on the planet.
And that's by focusing on AI that are like more, I don't want to overuse the word ethical, but like less about AI that use more than a threshold of energy. That's what you're saying. People were focusing on.
People were focusing on some stuff like that. Overall, they seem to be focusing more on, if we don't control AI with mathematical guarantees, then like maybe we're all completely fucked. And I think there's a lot more nuance to it than just trying to control AI.
There's some pretty important people here.
Beneficial seems nicer. Like, I quite like these guys from like the Center of Apparent Selves, who have the idea that we should make Bodhisattva AI, like AI that's are concerned with the well-being of all sentient beings.
Well, Roman Yampolsky is going to be there, and I know he's.
I almost said Polanski.
My bad. It's all, and that's your fault, David. I can only. No, but Yampolsky is one of the greater goods in the world, but he's definitely concerned about AI. He thinks that AI could cause a lot of stress because we are talking about something that's super intelligent, and it could probably be faster and better than us. So I think this will be an interesting conversation and a great series of lectures. I'm glad we're doing that.
Yeah, thank you for the talks, and namaste, and see you in the future somewhere.
Love you. That was great, dude. See you later.
See you.
Peace.
Much love, brother. Dude,
Peace.
That was awesome. Yes.
Dude.
Zarathustra Goertzel.
Dude, he's awesome. Do you guys want to keep going for a few minutes? Because I know that we had a little bit more about the Sephiroth. We want to do that last 10 minutes on that.
Talk me into it. Fuck yeah. I mean, if I'm in.
Well, we left off. I know exactly where we left off. So that's why I thought it'd be cool to finish it, because
this is the wrong diagram to use, though. Because see the pathways? They're not this. Right. They're not the actual ones. There we go. That's closer. Yeah.
All right. This is good. Isn't it? This is okay. This is
better.
That
works.
But...
Yeah, either one of those works. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just because you were saying about how
this one you can see, that one you can see the letters. The one that you're sharing.
You couldn't see Gimel on the Binah, right? Wasn't that the deal? You're asking where Gimel was, and it had to do with Binah.
Yeah. So you see it right there underneath the it says Gimel. So that's a vertical pathway, and then it keeps going. You see the 3 in the Hebrew letter itself. So yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Right. So that's a like when people do like the cross where you like your shoulders.
Here's a Gimel right here, and a Gimel means camel, and that's also why camel, Gimel, and camel cigarettes, Gimel cigarettes, and the symbol of the Gimel. But if you zoom in down there, you see right under 3, there's the Gimel.
And then that thing coming up off the top is the hump of the camel, and then the front leg and the back leg. Is that what that indicates? Like a picture of a camel.
You can take it that way. It's because I don't know if it's Phoenician or Chaldean roots or both, but that's how they get those pictographs that correspond. So the European occultists are much more hung up on that than traditional Kabbalists. But I think it's interesting to like just look at the two schools together, because that you can extrapolate a lot more information and even implications that way, because they meet in specific ways and they're different in specific ways. But yeah, so these attributions of these letters is not taken to be a traditional set of attributions, like how these are applied to the pathways. When you see these numbers, like these are the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet that are connecting these 10 Sephiroth. But like the Ari system would be a different set of attributions. But I found places in the Zohar and in commentary on the Zohar, specifically from the Ramak from the 16th century, where he starts speaking to the letters corresponding to the pathways, and in certain places you can see that he's clearly speaking to what is supposed to be a more recent discovery with the Golden Dawn and the OTO, and how they make the attributions, which actually I think is derived from Eliphas Levi ultimately, but for this set of attributions. But I think what it is that what they're pointing to is actually something real, and that's why he actually decoded something that if you were to meditate deeply enough on it long enough, you would automatically kind of come to. Same thing like Crowley switched certain things around, but I think people see that as kind of like his craft, like that's like a like magic in like the sorcery kind of sense. But I think he was really just kind of like with the Saudi star issue, I think he was just articulating a defect that we're experiencing in like our duality, like the way that we're relating to this tree like unconsciously, and so he kind of shows where the problem exists. And so if anything, that's like that's the opposite of him. Like there's other places with him where you can find he's kind of not necessarily doing things for the right reasons, potentially, like his involvement with the sinking of the Lusitania and actual like false flag operations and stuff. I think the rationalization from him would be the same as the Freemasons, where they're kind of like, we just want to illuminate humanity, and if they're this easily duped, then like maybe they need to have some hard reckoning to become aware of that, that vulnerability. So I don't know how much I relate to that,
But what is the point of? I mean, why do they use this map as why do they use this map for self-ascension? Like, what is the deal here that really does this work? Do you get to the crown of wisdom and understanding through strength and mercy and splendor and victory and foundation?
Well, this also doesn't, like, we're looking at a diagram, and like this is literally like twisting through space. Like this is like a vortex. So like these things are all in movement, and they're showing you very specific dynamics that relate to the planets and the solar system, and like what things are in relationship to each other when you take a sphere and you divide it. And so, and literally, like, this is relating to how our language is like built on top of that. So like our language is like, it has the original conception of like, there's the argument is from rabbis, Kabbalists, is that like when the Hebrew alphabet was first conceived, it came as like a large insight that was actually pointing to something real, which is just mathematical. It's like the idea that we didn't invent math, we discovered it. Like we invented the symbols to represent the thing, but the thing in itself. So like Sephiroth means numeration. So like this is literally like how things come into form. And so you're looking at two orders at the same time. You're looking in the Kabbalistic tree, you're looking at like the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. They both exist, but like the tree of life is like transcendent of this other order. And so, and we relate to that other order, that topical layer, as though it were the thing in itself. And so it's a matter of vantage point and where you're looking from, whether you're looking from, like, as things come into form, they go from etheric to gross. And so that's like a principle of emanation. And you'll actually find that idea expressed throughout like pretty much all the mystery schools, whether you're talking about Patanjali or you're talking about Zohar, they both communicate the same thing.
In this map, are any of those bubbles in particular part of the topical here?
Right. So when you say bubbles, like the Sephiroth, like people see that these is So it's Sephira if it's singular, or Sephiroth if it's plural. But like it's literally, like I say, it means numeration. Like the Sephiroth really doesn't connect to sphere. So like people will think it means sphere, but it actually does have an etymological connection to sapphire. So like the way that sapphire forms, apparently they found it relatable.
I have one right here. This is sapphire.
There you go.
I love this stuff. A hunk of sapphire. I love it.
Totally. Yeah. So
crystal.
Yeah. So that's the idea, is you're looking at two different distinct orders. You're looking at a primary order that's making up the organism that we see in lightning, trees, and the human body. And then so that's actually the lightning flash, that extends through the tree. And so that's the way that things move and they take shape. And so it's like the Fibonacci sequence, basically.
So it's like a path of least resistance.
Yeah. In fact, the Fibonacci sequence it actually shows up in Bereshit in Genesis. There's a trick you can do, and it's actually shown in the movie Pi. But when he demonstrates it, he actually says one word that's not actually the word that he writes, and that he has like the tree of knowledge divided by the what does he say, the garden itself. But one of those words is actually where Adam and Eve exit the garden. It's I believe the northeast, and that's actually something you see show up in the how you can work with the Babylonian magic squares, which is like the oldest mathematics on the planet, apparently. So like, because language was math, it ultimately still is, right? But like people were literally speaking in number. So like you'll actually, there's texts of old Kabbalists, like I think it's Gikatilia, I think that's how you say his name. He was like, he would write these manuscripts. People found all this guy's writings, and some of it they didn't know what to make of because it seemed kind of like gibberish, but there was like words interspersed. But it turned out he was just writing mathematical formulas in the language. So he's literally like speaking in math. It's pretty trippy. But yeah.
That was that Babylonian mathematic. That was.
Why did
the
ABBA
oldest-
come up? They have a song about. No, okay, Chiquitita.
No.
I thought that's hilarious though. They thought maybe Chiquitilia was Chiquitita. I like that.
Oh, weird. That's funny.
Yeah. That's like
Gigatilia, I think, something like that. But
That's a great.
yeah.
That's a cool synchronicity. I'm just gonna take.
Well, Abba is Hebrew for father, and actually Abba is what we refer to Chochmah as. So Chochmah is Abba, and then Bina is Ima.
Hence
and
the
so
two
that's-
backwards B's, like butterfly wings on our transhumanist child. But you know what I mean. It's also
Those guys did so much good for society.
yeah, it's true.
People
It's
to have
true.
it barely begun to realize, they'll look back on them and realize how
It's
much
only just begun.
great they did as a group.
That's good.
That Babylonian mathematic system was actually an alphabet.
A grammar.
Yeah.
That's a grammar.
Totally. So basically, the way that those Babylonian squares work, you add up the numbers horizontally or vertically, and they'll all equal the same number. That's what makes for a magic square, right? And so if you add the numbers, like with the Babylonian square for the sun, if you add them all up, it totals 666 because it's a 6x6 square, and each row adds up to 111. So all the different planetary squares have that, but there's actually a trick you can do most people don't know about, where if you actually take it and you fold it into a tube, you can actually, and if you go in the same direction, which would be northeast, so like even like older Babylonian magic squares, or not just Babylonian, but Arabian, like there's like different versions of them like through time, but they'll like actually show you in the way that it's drawn that you're supposed to go in this direction. So like it's hard to explain this kind of, but they're like steps. So they can go in order if you fold the thing in on itself. And so then you'll come up to a certain point, and then you'll see that, oh, that number doesn't match what it would be in the step. So you do the same pattern every time. You go down to the bottom, go one row over, and it'll be that number. So it's like it basically, the Babylonian squares demonstrate, as a matter of fact, that we discovered math. Like, because there's no way that we could have like just thought this up. That's what
right.
it's pointing at.
I forgot that I have. Hold on, let me just get this out. It's a little baggy there. Oh, okay. So check out this guy right here.
Oh yeah.
Boom. Babylonians.
I think it's Jupiter. I think
Yeah,
is it a 4x4?
This is a Jupiter on this side. Here you go.
Yeah.
Right there. And then on this side, this is the Babylonian square.
Of Jupiter.
Of Jupiter for protection. Yeah.
What does you mean of Jupiter? Is it saying something?
Oh, well, so they're all numbers. So it's hard to tell because they're all Hebrew. But if you look at it here, here's like what should be on a Babylonian square, and on here you've got, there you go.
That's an 8x8 square, or a 4x4 square rather, 16 numbers. And then we were just looking at a bigger square on the screen.
Right.
Yeah.
So this one on the screen is another. This one's which one's this one? This is Daniel
6x6.
Yeah, that's the sun square.
If the 4x4 was overlaid on top of this 6x6, would it just be?
Yeah. So there's a way that. Yeah, so there's a way you actually put it in the upper right corner, I believe.
Right.
There's a way that these things actually work with each other, so they continue on. So like I'm kind of crazy because like I'm fucking totally convinced at this point that what you're looking at with the Babylonian squares is actually what was represented by the Tower of Babel, with a specific way it was repeatedly painted, like from Albrecht Dürer and others. And Albrecht Dürer actually, incidentally, he invented his own magic square, which is on Melancholia 1. It's a famous etching. It's actually the basis for the film Melancholia by Lars von Trier. So actually you'll see 4x4 squares show up throughout that movie, like subliminally all over the place. Like she'll lay out some chocolates and it's in the 4x4 square, and then she'll take one of them and put it on a pillow. It's all loaded with symbolism. But anyway, you basically the different squares work with each other in such a way that it like the way that Babel is communicated, where it's like in these steps. So it's like the spiral goes up in these steps. That it's pretty crazy. Like it relates to there's a mathematical code in Genesis that basically when you take where Adam and Eve exit the garden, and you see that in relationship to I believe it's the tree of life, but I haven't looked at this for a while. So
They're
tree of knowledge,
they're
or the tree of
also
life.
all equivalent. So it's like, if this is, then therefore that is, and that is, therefore this is, and they're all equivalent to each other. So it's a magic square. They would use these in even the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, and midwives would put magic squares on the stomachs of pregnant women, and they would use these as protections against miscarriages, right? So people really associated mathemagics all through the Occidental period, and even going back, of course, before Pythagoras.
With the numbers you had up before on that metal disc, there were 16 of them. Yeah, if you meditate and send energy in this helixtical pattern, like from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, like, so it spirals from the upper right down to the bottom left, middle to the right, like up to the top, down, up, around, and down. If you're meditating that's like a flow state your brain can go in, which I would imagine would heal your body and make it easier to give birth. Like if they're meditating in the shapes guided by these.
Thank you. That's exactly it. Because this is the point when you're dealing with these things. It's like when people are relating to the magic, you think you put this thing here and something magic's going to happen. It's like when they were trying to teach like African women how to use a condom, and they demonstrated with a banana, and then they ended up finding out that the women were putting the condoms on bananas and putting them by the bed as though that was like the equivalent, or protect, because they're relating
magic,
to things in this
juju,
kind of
protection,
symbolic way. But you
Wow.
got it. Because it's an exercise that you're actually participating in. And that's the same thing that goes for when entheogens of various types are used in ritual. It's not just like we relate to things like through entertainment or like spectator or whatever, but it's such an experiential thing that you're like a participatory thing, because it's not just a substance. Like, oh, you take this substance and stuff happens. Like you went to the concert and you watched the show. Like it doesn't really work that way, because it's interactive. Like it requires your own participation. So like, DMT is one of those, LSD is one of those, where it's like it does its thing, it's going to do what it's going to do, but what you do with it is something else. And so like this actually involves an exercise. So like you got it right away.
I can feel it halfway through the number sequence too. From when it goes from 8 to 9, the helix changes directions. It's like it goes through the singularity and then reverses direction. You go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then it like goes backwards to 9, 10, 11, 12. It's like it reverses coil. That's a wild pattern.
Yeah, I saw a YouTube video of this like so long ago, so many years ago, and it was from this Protestant guy, and he was demonstrating how you can do this thing where you fold it into the tube and then you fold it the other way. You fold it both ways and it goes back and forth. So it's like it's this crazy interdimensional thing that takes place if you follow it through. And so the idea is that these ancient people did this with their mind. Like, and did they get to the point where it was just like this natural thing? Like it's so bizarre. And then it relates directly to language. And this is like the earliest alphabet we're looking at here. And so it's like of the earliest alphabets. And so it's fascinating to see how, through time, like if you were to call it a fall, it's like we were at this place where we had this tremendous insight. And then there's this kind of like movement away from that,
I can see how you could do math with that thing too, because if you remember where the number is on the square, then at that point of the pattern, you're going to know that that's the number. Like if you're like, oh, wow, this is a full mode shift. Like I'm just visualizing the pattern like flowing 1, 2, 3, 4. Like if you're just picturing a line flowing through the 1 through the 2 through the 3 through the 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. It's like that shape is memorizable. That is a shape that you can do forward and then you can do it backwards, 16, 15, 14, 13,
right,
and memorize it and memorize where every number is on that pattern, so that if you need to recall the data, you know where it is. So you've got like spatial representation of numeric value, which could be transposed into doing math. Anyway, maybe that's where like psychedelics are like really valuable when you're transcending like logical concepts or like predetermined notions.
Right. And this is the thing, is it's not putting it aside to it's like one time I saw in front of a church that's actually like Andreas in SoCal, there's a church that said what was it? Fuck. it was like they're talking about the guillotine of truth, and it was faith. Faith is the guillotine of reason. And I was like, what the fuck? Are you serious? Like, because I'm like, dude, like faith, as far as I'm concerned, as from my understanding, is like what carries you when reason has reached its limits. So it's like you reason something out as far as you can go. You can recognize paradoxes where the thing falls back on itself. It's like this Ouroboros. But I see the faith as the thing that transcends the thing. But there's no like shortcut to that. Like you got to reason something out. You don't put reason aside and accept something on faith.
Yeah.
Like if anything, that's like the antithesis of faith.
Right. Which in the Bible, even it says like test all things, hold fast to what is true. Right. Like you're supposed to use science and math. But this is also the funny thing is modern secularist religion or spirituality and like what is good for you and trying to connect with people and where they're at. You can see it's not really accurate. Like if you've done, so I was gonna say earlier, if you've done DMT, like you go into a world of geometry and math and numbers, and it's basically if you don't know the language, you won't understand what's going on in that world. But I'm sure if you were a Kabbalist in the 1600s and you're really good at geometry and math, you just understand what's going on. You're like, oh, I get it. Like this is what this means, essentially.
You'd see shapes distorted and be like, that is you'd relate it to your own behavior and why my life is suffering. You can see like the patterns distorted.
Even if it's like, you're like, I saw some shapes versus somebody's like, I saw a dodecahedron and then I saw like a Metatron cube. Like you're already in a better spot if you know what's going on to that degree, right? But you can see in the architecture of the old religions that they clearly understood this because they're very reminiscent of DMT. Like there's something about the sacred geometry that they're perceiving and picking up on. So I feel like that's already a clue that you can intuit that there's something true that they've found. But you look today and you see these like weird square buildings that just seem so just in disrespect of the golden ratio. You know what I mean?
I could imagine building golden ratioed buildings and people just be like, oh, that's new. Oh, that's kind of unique. Right, yeah, and then in like 700 years or in 300 years, they'll remember this period of history where we started to do it.
Yeah. Right.
Well, there's actually Winnie the Pooh is the original book was specified by what's the author of Winnie the Pooh? You must know Andreas.
A. Milne.
He specified that the book would be according to the golden rectangle.
Right.
So it was like
and now we're 6. Right. Now we're 6. But yeah, I think we're heading into a time also like the cool thing about Tartaria and like this idea of like ancient civilizations like Atlantis, that they were the idea of an ancient advanced civilization that built architecture in accordance with nature, that in that harmony we're able to find safer function, right? Like if water's going around the city and it's being used in a water wheel that's producing electricity and we're living in some sort of balance with nature, that's something we've lost, right? We're not trying to do that at this point necessarily. I don't know. I feel like
I've always resonated with the idea that Atlantis is like a spiritual dimension that was like as though it were another place that we would go to that connected us and all kinds of things.
Well, I mean, but I just mean even like in the physical sense that these kinds of architectures that are it helps the way we build things. If you build it to be a golden ratio, like if you build a square building at the ocean, waves will hit it and eventually it will be damaged. Whereas if you follow the curves and you make some sort of weird curved thing that doesn't seem square, but it follows nature's path, it'll last a lot longer, right?
Right.
Like you can't just make a wall and expect it to constantly being hit all the time and expect that to last forever. And that's what a lot of our thinking is. But it looks like in the past, people used to build cities. Okay, the river's coming through here, so we're going to build our city next to the river. We're going to add a water wheel, and then that creates this ecosystem, bees and birds and flowers, and all that.
I wonder if you could build golden ratios in and out of walls to break erosion, like extra dimensional ratios where it's not just curved wall. Or like
I think so I have a friend who's a Freemason who he built his own house, and the structure of it, I can't fit, like looking at it, like it's very stable, It's well done, but it doesn't feel like it should work. You're like, that doesn't look like it's like they have these little tricks that they do, and a lot of them are based off of like sacred geometry type stuff. That it's like, wait, how is that?
You were saying that you thought Atlantis could be like a spiritual dimension. Do you think? Because like I was just told by Corin Nemec, who's he's Freemason, and he was like the king's chamber, these tombs in Egypt were sensory deprivation tanks. They'd get in these sarcophagi with
there's an argument for that. Yeah, there's never been a mummy found in an Egyptian pyramid. They're in the Valley of the Kings, and so they actually, when we had to blast into the Great Pyramid to get to the halls to get to the king's chamber. And when we got there, and the sarcophagus was sealed, and we actually, like, it was weighed tons, and we had to push it aside thinking we were going to find something inside of it. And so the story goes is that it was empty. Who knows? Maybe somebody took whatever was in there and took it elsewhere. But there's a beam that moves through the king's chamber through the course of the day. They actually have a recreation of it at the UN for Lucis Trust. So like where people will meditate in a room on a single beam moving through the room, but it's actually modeled after the king's chamber because there's this shaft. And so like tourists will watch this light move through, and apparently it makes contact with the king's chamber. There are those who have speculated that it was used as an initiation rite during Venus eclipses, which happen every 100 years, twice within 10 years of each other.
Or also to shine, to make ormus, like using lenses to shine, to make, like powdered monatomic gold or weird stuff, right?
Or hit mirrors and light up the whole chamber super bright.
Yeah.
And then, or maybe wake the guy up who's laying in the sarcophagus when he's in a deprivation state. But if he's covered, then you wouldn't see the light necessarily. But then they would like go, they'd vibrate the room, and they'd have these like psychedelic trance, like when your spirit dances across the unit, like the transcendent consciousness,
astral project.
Yeah, your spirit would project, and then I wonder if they would be able to communicate with other people projecting at that moment. Because you're like, if you're tapping into a spiritual realm of Atlantis, I wonder if that's resonant from what they were doing at that time, that they were in that realm so much that they're still available to, like, the spiritual memory or the sensory memory is still available. Because I never really thought of Atlantis as a spirit. I always just thought of it as a place, like a building and a thing. But like
the Donovan song, right?
I don't know.
Well, you could think about how weird it would be like in 100 years when people are saying how much they loved Minecraft. Like, where was Minecraft? Or like they loved a server that they played a Counter-Strike on or something like that. So the idea that there's a virtual association, like, sure, there is probably a civilization and a place, but there's also, we have to start understanding meta consciousness. People exist in multiple levels now, and they probably did before.
Right. That's the thing about, like, it's relatable to the temple. So Solomon is told by Hashem not to build the temple. Why? Not as a warning so much, maybe as a that you can't. So like the temple, the temple is not to be built with human hands. Not because it shouldn't, but because it can't be. But his son goes ahead and builds it anyway. So you have this kind of, that's why I was saying, it's like very similar to that tree in the garden that you're like, don't eat from this tree. And it's like, well, what are people going to do? A dog licks his ass because it can, right? So it's like, if we can do something, it's we generally do it.
The temple that Solomon was being commanded to build but couldn't build was
told not to build it. That the temple won't be built by human hands. That the temple is being built, but it's not to be manufactured.
It's a conscious state of consciousness.
It's something that has its own intelligence that's inherent in nature, that over time there's a futility to. It's something that we are constructing, but the idea is that when things take shape with organic life and whatnot, it starts on such a primordial level that the last thing that we see affected is the topical, is the superficial. And so that's the issue with society and a lot of the identity politics, culture war stuff, is that so much of it, we're so focused on the most external aspect of the thing. When we go from etheric to gross, we're relating to things from the outside, trying to get in. And so that's where you end up with these kind of, confusions of being born in the wrong thing, It's like you're born, it is what it is. Like, that's the Tao. Sorry,
Like focusing on this externality is like building the false temple.
Right. And I'm all for like recognition of polarity. Like polarity exists everywhere in nature. That's why somebody wants to say that they're non-binary. I'm like groovy because I'm a non-dualist myself. Like I resonate quite a bit with Vedanta. You know, I'm more schooled in Patanjali, but I can totally get down with that idea, you know, that there is a non-dualness to us, and that is in regard to everything, that, you know, like the yin and the yang has those two dots on both sides, you know what I mean? Like there's a distinction, but there's no separation. The problems seem to arise when we're projecting a duality on top of that pre-existing polarity. And so, and that's where we have the conflict, because we're relating to opposites that they're always in opposition. Opposites aren't always in opposition. That's why when you're having a debate with somebody and you're expressing a corollary, and somebody may react to a corollary as though it negated what they said. It's like that when you're having a conversation, you say but. So if you're like, somebody says something and you're like, yeah, but, it's like if you say yeah and, they may not notice that you said yeah and, but but that's the thing. If you want to have coherent communication, you kind of have to acknowledge that we exist with paradox, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if two dudes in a room are standing across from each other, you might say they're standing opposite each other, but they're not in opposition.
Right. Not until we project that into it. And the power of our imagination is extraordinary. You know, our ability to project and what we can create with our minds. Like, you know,
Did Hashem tell Solomon specifically, like what did he tell him about the temple? Did he describe it?
I hate to paraphrase the Old Testament, but yeah, he basically they describe it later in First Kings when it gets built. So there's a lot of description, along with the temple incense that we know contained acacia. There's indication of DMT in the temple incense that they were, you know, and it's related with prophecy too. So you have this whole ritual, you know, that's so involved that it describes. But it's like that tree. It's like they're told not to do something. He's literally told not to do it, but because he can't, because it's not really doable, because the real temple, it's like, it's just communicating that but we're gonna build it anyway. And
right, they're supposed to have tabernacles, they can have tents, but they can move them around, but they're not supposed to cut stone. If they cut stone, they've defiled it immediately. As soon as you've cut the stone, you've defiled it, right?
Right. This is also symbolic, of course. Like they were the 40-year thing. Why do it have to be 40 years? Because that's mem. It's water. It has meaning.
I think there's a little bit to it on the net practical side too, because you have a generation of people that are completely forgetting Egypt. It's a cultural erasure of Akhenaten and everything else.
Right. It's also non-localization. It's being okay with non-localization, and the ego works the same way. It's like, that's why I say it's symbolic. It's symbolic of so much, and it's also some symbolism in practice, theoretically. So it's like, you know how like you have all these thoughts in your head, and then there's like the me thought, and the me thought somehow takes precedence. It's like normalized in society that's like a really significant thought, and we contract and expand in relationship to that thought as though it was more than a thought. And so like if you have a real threat, like if a fucking saber-toothed tiger is coming at you or whatever, you know, you jump out of the way. Like that's a good instinctual reflex. But we create threats where they don't actually exist because we see the ego as something that's vulnerable, but that's because we imbue it and we give it that strength. And so that's why in Hebrew you have like Oz and On. You have the strength that's the integrity of the thing, as in Yakin and Boaz, the established in strength. But then you have, you know, the alternate version of that, which is like in Heliopolis, there was the rabbis that actually like were, you know, they were there with the Egyptian mysticism. So like a good Kabbalist will be okay with, if you have the idea that this came from Egypt, you know, there's no cause for offense in that, because if they really are deep into this, they actually believe that this isn't something that anybody really owns in any real sense, that this is actually what it's pointing to is just what we inherently are. So where is the problem? You know, it doesn't always have that tribalism aspect to it, or wanting to take claim. Like the same thing goes for the Sumerian text, like the Epic of Gilgamesh or whatever. If you're a religious person that feels threatened by the Epic of Gilgamesh, that's all the more reason why you should read it and look at it, you know. It's like,
yeah, like it's like acknowledging that algebra was made by the Arabs. Like that doesn't mean you're not gonna, that's not, you don't even have any animosity towards anyone, that even if you're, well, there's religious, spiritual, all this stuff. Like it's such good data that it doesn't matter who created it. It's similar with this. If it came from Egypt, if it came from the Jews, if it came from how far back, it almost at this point, it's like it's so valuable that it's
the Jews. I say like algebra, right? Because it's the Hebrew. That's what algebra means, arguably. You know, the Hebrew.
That's interesting. I never heard that.
Yeah. It's like because like the earliest versions of also alchemy, right? Alchemy means the chemet, the study of chemet. So it's from the African studies. Yeah.
Yeah, but isn't chem is Egypt, right? It's like science in Egypt or something. Yeah.
Egypt, or just it could also just be, we don't know. It's so much. It could be much more ancient than Egypt. Egypt is the after the Nile irrigation changes. So there was a connection to the empires of Eritrea and Ethiopia and like wherever Liberia, the empire that is in Liberia, and Egypt. And Egypt was a much like the pharaoh was a single family that was part of a much larger empire. And there were river systems across the Taban Reset. So the entirety of Africa, also, this all was a lot more recent than people think. You know, Randall Carlson and everything, talking about cataclysmic changes. Ian talking about not everything happening annually in the nice flow of consistency, but sometimes just crazy things happen. So probably within the last few thousand years, or even more recently, there was far more water in North Africa and in parts of Egypt. And so the idea also that people were so far removed and isolated is illogical, because they had the capacity with boats to get across. You know, Isabella Live 2.0 says, love you guys. Love you too. Love you too, bro.
Isabella.
You too, bro.
Live 2.0. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Welcome forward.
Interesting.
I wish I could read super chats. I wonder if I have any on my channel. I'm co-streaming over to my channel. I'm going to go over to my channel and look. Next time I'll stream it to Rumble also.
Yeah, I've been doing Rumble. I like Rumble a lot. Rumble's pretty great. Love you guys, Rumble.
I like Rumble. And X, do you ever stream to X?
I'm streaming to X right now. Yeah. Yeah. Here, I'll put on a little background here where we look at the comments here. If you see something that we can pull up, Atlantis was before us. Let's bring it to Lemuria. We haven't talked about Lemuria much. That's a pretty important thing.
Mount Shasta, clearly.
Yeah, I think Shasta, Lemurians, also the idea that it's probably in between. So like Hawaii, I think is probably like a vantage point to some of old Lemuria, and like maybe even Polynesia, I'd like to say. Wherever we're not supposed to go, where the Navy's doing all their nuclear tests and trying to blow homes in the firmament, that's probably where Lemuria was. It's probably like right underneath there. Magic Bus portal codes. I would love to play the Magic School Bus anatomy game. Do you remember that game where you're like in, like the kid's too sick to go to school, so you end up going in his tummy, like, and you go through his body.
The book, Magic School Bus. Yeah.
No.
Totally.
Oh, I love that Magic School Bus.
That was early 80s, I believe, or mid 80s or something, right?
The game was mid 90s, I think.
Oh, the game. I'm thinking of the book.
Yeah, I got to go in his intestines, like like a maze or something like that.
Fascinating.
42 says Tony Nagy.
Dude, playing computer games in the 80s was like, I'm glad I wish that it didn't exist when I was really little, and then I was like 6 or 7, because I was playing video games when I was like 2 on the Atari. Yeah. But then the graphics started to get good in like 1984 on the Apple. And like it looked like you were in a room, kind of, even though the lines would be drawn and you'd have to like walk around the fun house. It was really, really mind-bending. I thought it was very good for my brain, but it made me good as relative. It was just warping for my consciousness to think about that space that wasn't really this meta space. Like talking about Atlantis being a place in your mind. Like I
think it's awesome. I mean, these games, dude, especially because you're so lucky because you grew up like during like MAME DOS arcade games, and those games are incredible. Some of the best games ever written are gonna never surpass anything we'll ever do. Will surpass some of those games.
Do you think that? So you actually think that they had like meta realms that they would travel to, and that when we remember places in history, some of them were actually like Minecraft of the time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny if you're talking about like those ancient writings, like they're written in a completely different way than anything that we have. So first of all, there's songs too. Like it's all meant to be sung, and we don't really know what that sounded like. We can only guess. And then also, like I was saying, it's all mathematical. And then you have like even the Odyssey is like a song, you know. And it's like you're going to tell people the history. You're going to tell for the generations to know what it was that happened. But it's like it's all your way that you want to articulate it. And so like Hebrew's crazy because it's like for every word you have like 20 to 30 meanings. And so if you're going to like actually like read the Torah, like you're looking at it from in so many different ways the whole way along. It's like it's not the same experience. And still, like even from that, like you can't know whatever the hell that was like for them. Like what
if you
know
get
what
in
I
a
mean?
clear, like a state of mind where you're meditative and like no thoughts, does it translate in a clearer way?
I mean, like with Bereshit, they say you should be able to get it all from the first letter. And if you don't get it from the first letter, the insight, the meaning, then you get it from the first word. And if you don't get it from the first word, you get it from the first 42 letters, because the 42nd letter of Genesis is the first letter of the four klipot mentioned. So it's like, and the earth was void, you know, without form and all of that. So it's like, there's like the shells or the husks around holiness, like the first mention of them is like the first 42 letters. And so there's a 42 letter name of God that's derived from that. And there's a 216 letter name, which is derived from 3 chapters in the book of Exodus, where Moses is standing at the Red Sea and he has this song. And the song is made of three verses that are all 72 letters each. And so 72 plus 72 plus 72 is 216. So the treatment of it when they actually read it, this is so bizarre. Kabbalists, not just rabbis, but the way they treat, there's a working you can actually do with that, where the first verse you actually read right to left. The second verse you read left to right. So for Hebrew, that's backwards. And so
Oh, sorry to interrupt, but that's reading those 16 numbers on that square was. You went, the first half was in one pattern, then you went back, you went the opposite direction for the second half.
Exactly. You got it. Yeah, totally.
Here's a comment on Ian's channel right now from Couch Squad 92. Great topics. My mind is spinning.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about, is spinning consciousness. So you say you read the first half of the Torah?
It's 3 verses that are in the book of Exodus that are called, it's like 72. It's a triplet of 72. And so the last verse you would then read left to right again, which is normal for Hebrew. So you're reading it in both versions.
It's Shem Hamephorosh, right? Shem Hamephorosh, right? Is this right? The Tanaic name and the Tetragrammaton, this is supposed to come from the 72, the thrice 72 name, or the 42.
There's 72 names, yeah, but this isn't just a name. This is actually like something that's actually
it's a definition, right?
Yeah, so it's referenced in Pi in the most like extremely occultly satirical way. So like when the rabbis are after it, and so are the people who want to use it for the stock market, it's communicating something about, like, because he's like, you already have it. He's like, it's not the number is nothing, it's what's between the numbers. What he says is the syntax. So it's like how you arrive at it. So the idea is that he's arrived at it in this direct experiential way, where it's not just a number for him, because that's when he learns it. We see it as like, oh no, he got rid of the number, as though there was anything special about the number. But the fact that they chose 216 is because of Gevurah. So they're after false God.
But that's what's content. Okay, yeah, but that's the thing. It's super contentious, because what he's saying is that the rabbis, because the rabbis are the ones who are chasing him the whole time, and the rabbis are the ones who are trying to find. One group is trying to give him technology so he can have access, and it's for Wall Street. And so it's one side. Let's go back to the Sephirot for a second, right? It's one side of the Sephirot, because you've got a group that are all empowered and they have all of the knowledge. Where is it at? Hold on. They have all the knowledge, so they're not really thinking about what to do with it. And there's another group that has wisdom, right? And so he's in the center of this. The group that has wisdom doesn't have the name of God, but that's crazy, because the whole idea is that we have the name of God.
Right. No, I'm sure you've written down every 216 number. You've intoned them all. And he's like, but it hasn't got you anywhere, because you're looking to something to be this thing that you already have. So he's like, I got it. I understand. He's actually, with him saying that, he's telling them that you have it too.
They don't understand it.
They want it because they think that it's like something to like accomplish or arrive at. Like, it's, if anything, it's the opposite of that. Like, that's the nature of like humility. Like, you don't get humility without humiliation. Like, it's like it's dignity and humility are the exact same thing, and they don't oscillate. They're just what they are. Pride and shame, those oscillate all the time. Like, you contract and expand in relationship to what somebody says about you. Like I was saying, like the me thought thing. So that's like, you know, because there's like a stand-in for us. Like, if there's an alien here, like they're already here, because it's fucked up, man. Like, I don't know if you ever had like an experience where you like actually go like into your, for lack of a better word, like energy body. Like, if you just feel that energy, and like when the mind comes back, like this can happen with sleep paralysis, where if it's lucid, if you have like lucid sleep paralysis, and there's like when you come back to, there's something, I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but there's something fucking terrifying about the voice that's like that you're so accustomed to. It's just it's your ego or whatever, but it's like a mental model of yourself, and it's like there's another present, because the consciousness, the ultimate identity doesn't have all the attributes. Like, it's beyond attributes. Like, it's just energy. So it's like it's non-localized is I guess my point. And then once it's localized, there's something fucking initially terrifying about that there's like somebody else here. So I think there was like I think it was a Rob Asher movie, the guy who did Room 237. Like, he went on to do like a documentary called The Nightmare. And like, I've had a lot of lucid sleep paralysis like throughout my life. Like, if I sleep on my back, I almost always have that. But like it's like, this is supposed to be like a horror thing. And I'm like, you guys, like, I'm watching him interview all these people and they're talking about their sleep paralysis. I'm like, have you ever let go into it? Like, just like really let go? Because it's like your breathing will become super elongated. It's like these really like so refined and so relaxed. And like, you can just like, I think the fear is that people think they're going to suffocate, that they're not getting enough breath. But I think that's like, it's like pranayama, but it's like, that's what I think we do it anyway. I think we get regenerated in the night, but we're generally like not lucid through the process. And I think it's a short process, but with like, if you do it lucidly, you can kind of elongate it, which is probably what samadhi is in the first place. In fact, that's what Baba Hari Das used to say about samadhi, is that it's actually something that everyone experiences in the dream cycle for a brief period, but they do it consciously. And the purpose of lotus is just so you don't fall and hit your head when you like when you go into paralysis. So like Babaji, with my teacher who I studied with for years, he would say, if you can't sit in full lotus, you might as well, if it's happening, you might as well lay on your back, because it's like literally like you're scanning your body, but it starts to go on its own. It starts to do it by itself, so you don't have to like direct it, if that makes sense.
I've noticed when in lucid dream that you don't need to breathe in that much. You seem to get oxygen through your skin enough. You can breathe in just a tiny bit, but that you need to breathe out more than you breathe in. And it's really about controlling the carbon dioxide that you're breathing out. If you breathe out too much, too fast, the lucid state will start to rupture. Like, you'll see it like Inception start to like, and then you'll lose it. But if you can maintain that real slow breath out and like control maybe it's the electrons on the carbon that have been oxidized into carbon dioxide, you can maintain that lucid state. And yeah, I can imagine being like, what you think is paralysis is actually just very slow breathing.
Right. You'll experience it as paralysis when you try to move and you can't. That's why they call it paralysis. But if you're not trying to move and you're just like letting go into it, that's not, it's strange like that. But I think it's just that the processes of what's happening in your body, it's like there's something that's like a release that allows for like more rejuvenation than you get through the rest of the sleep cycle, you know.
Probably like an autophagy or something, because if you're not like, when I go into that state and I don't breathe, they'll be like, Ian, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm taking one breath every minute, like real slow breathing kind of thing, or like every 30 seconds I'll do a breath. I think my body starts to eat itself. Like it starts to lose, for whatever reason. What would be the justification, the rationale for that that maybe you're starving certain cells of oxygen and it's taking oxygen from what it doesn't need, and then
Sure, it's like a whippet. And actually, you'll what I don't know if you've experienced this, but what will happen with me is there'll be a tone that starts. I have this really elongated breathing. I'll be laying there and I'm like asleep. It's like being in between, kind of. But it's like there'll be like a tone that starts. It's like whoa. I don't have that, and I don't. There's like a point where I don't even know where I go or what happens. But it's when I come to. I'm just full of energy. Like it could be, this could be the middle of the night, and I don't know if that was happening for like seconds or like an hour or what, but I'll feel like I can run a mile. Like I'll wake up like full of energy.
that's rest and sleep are different. I've noticed that. Like you can go to rest state. I did experiment laying on my back like this with my arms up because it opens up the diaphragm, and then digestion kicks into gear. Your stomach will just gurgle, and then it gives you better rest. Like you can fall asleep for 3 minutes, and when you wake up, it'll be like you've got an hour and a half of rest. Kind of state.
Dig it. Yeah, who was it that they said? Andreas probably knows. Who was it that used to go to sleep in a chair holding a ball or something, and it was like when the ball would drop, he would wake up, and that was his nap.
Salvador Dali would have a key, and he left it over a plate, and so it would fall out of his hand. It would wake him up, and that way he would just get REM states, and he would get multiple REM states, and people thought he was crazy, but the more REM states, the better, right? That's the deal.
I feel like it was like Galileo or something, but yeah, him too, probably.
Maybe that's an interesting concept, because as soon as you hit that state of like total relaxation, you can kind of that is a good start, I guess, to wake up.
You're like, you did it. You're like, you got what you needed. Now it's time to move on to no. But you could also do it over and over again. You like buzz yourself, and it doesn't quite wake you up, and then you fall back asleep, and you do it again. There's what's the name of the guy who is a transhumanist who electrocutes himself while he sleeps, and he's trying to like de-age himself. He's supposed to think he's like 10 years younger than his body is, or something, because of all the tech he's doing to himself. But electrocution while he sleeps is apparently a big part of that.
Dude, I love that. How you were saying, David, you hear that sound, that like
yeah.
I hear that too sometimes. I think it's always there, and it's just a matter of can you tune in to feel it?
Totally. I dig that it's underlined. It's kind of like you don't notice. It's like kind of a reversal of that, but it's like you don't notice. There could be could be television static just like going for the longest time, and you don't even know it until somebody turns it off. And then you're like, whoa. And then you realize that you've just been sitting there with this. It's like you become so accustomed. So it's also kind of relatable to that idea that like, it's a Krishnamurti idea that it's no measure of good health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. You know what I mean? Because it's like if you adjust to something, if you're adapted to something, it's not always necessarily healthy. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
What are you adapting to,
I guess it's like a desensitization method to survive the 3-dimensional realm. Like make sure you get enough food so you get your body fed, and then but there must be a reason that we were able to do it before. Maybe that was just
this is it. Yeah, because I think what it is that we used to just be that way. That's like when you talk about like Eden, like the Garden of Eden, that everything was just like it's describing this place where we were in this state. And like that state was ecstatic, because maybe it's that our natural state is actually ecstatic. Like if you think about it, like when generation, like what is sex? Like sex is a directive of energy, but I personally don't believe in like multiple energies. So like even if somebody says somebody has bad energy, I feel like there's contractions and expansions in relationship to this one energy. And I don't even think that it's like exclusive to us. Like I think it's actually something that's like shared. Like that's the thing about like life itself. Like as Kant would say, like the thing in itself. I think that's actually completely impersonal. And like our relationship to the personal is because we take the distinction to like be like there's a fear that we're separate, but we're not really separate. We're distinct. So like that's like, but we don't quite know how to reconcile that with our minds. So it's like we kind of fill in the gaps and project on top of this thing. So it's like that's why when you say like that sound, that tone is like pre-existing, like I totally jive with that, because I feel like we've just covered it up. It's like what's hidden beneath, it's like that's
I wonder if there's other things between us, like in like dark matter, some forms of things that we don't perceive on purpose, that so that we can observe the distinction.
Right. Totally. And so that's the thing, like with the idea of like the shadow beings or whatever that are associated with sleep paralysis. Like I've totally seen that. I've felt that, like an entity that you're like, but I think it's what we're living with all the time. And that's like the crazy thing is it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like they're here already. Like to me, that totally like speaks to the Klepo, like the husk around the emanated flow that like suckles off of it and is trying to get something from it, but it can't, you can dam it, but you can't stop it, like the emanated flow of life, like what life is. Like you can make restriction, but eventually it always wins in the end. Like that's why, like when speaking to like evolution, like I think that this is just this futile thing that's just going to happen, and we in our minds, we want to develop and manufacture the thing that's going to continue on for us, and it's just like it's like our own hubris. Like it's you know, but it's also teaching us by us doing that. It's part of the process too. You know, that's the paradox of it. Sorry.
It could be like there's this phantom DNA experiment where they'll bombard DNA in a vacuum with photons, and then when they'll remove the DNA, but the photons stay there for like 2 weeks as if the DNA, and they'll still like revolve, and that's like ghosts, you know, those photons are still there even though the matter's dissipated. And I wonder if you scale out and look at our planet and our system from a far distance, the DNA is just all everywhere on Earth. Like if it's far enough away, it's just going to look like a platter of DNA. Like you're not going to see the individual spots where it's actually at. And so the photons are just there. And that's these essences is like the memory of the whole of the surface DNA is like contractualizing these photon clouds, or this, I don't know if it's not necessarily plasma fields, it's photons in the experiment.
Totally. I mean, wasn't that the thing with like, so Helena Blavatsky, you know, her thing, a lot of people don't realize, was debunking like seances and stuff. Like early on in her career with mysticism, she wanted to debunk shit. And like her actual view of like what we would call ghosts or whatever, she's like, they're basically like grooves that are set into the elements. So in other words, suppose somebody like lived in a house for years and years and years that they eventually died in. They'd have like routines when they would walk through the house, and so like energetically that kind of like leaves these grooves. And when someone passes and you go into the space and you can kind of like, you can feel something comes through, you can feel it. So that's why like the idea of like a clairvoyant just being somebody who's super sensitive, like I actually can entertain that, like in theory, like the idea of a trace being left by, especially like if it's something like a repeated pattern in like a single space, like again and again, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because if we see light, we see photons bouncing off of stuff, but if the photons are there and they're not bouncing, if they're like spinning around and they're not, then we might still be able to perceive them with an organ other than the eyeballs. The eyeballs are good at seeing the reflected photons, but if there are photons just held in position, not bounce, that's, I mean, I've seen that photons can bounce off of plasma the way that they bounce off the center of clouds of plasma called the plasmon, the surface plasmon. I was reading that they can refract off of, like a photon will refract off of the plasmon at the center of a plasma cloud and transmit some sort of information from light to matter, from light to plasma that way. So that may be like either maybe a reverse engineering of what's going on photonically. Like I can sense the plasma, therefore I know what the photons have told it, and so I can feel the ghost, I can see the ghost, or I can sense the ghost. Or maybe it's actually just plasma that we're perceiving as the ghost when it's in the photon, but I don't know.
Right. Or it could be like, you know, if you have like a creek or something and there's like a part on the side of the creek where it's like water is flowing, and then there's like some area where it's like the water gets caught up in kind of like a whirl or something. So it's like almost like knots. Like it's like, because I think about this, like if somebody, you know, people, I don't think anything's for naught. Like I don't think any sacrifices for naught. Like I think everything kind of like contributes to something larger that's taking place, you know? So it's like, if somebody, you know, they had knots in their life that were like different, like I could see that being like that you could find a place in a space where it was like something was like caught up, like it's just like the water is moving, but there's certain restrictions that just kind of like set it into a place, and it can, if you were sensitive enough, you could be aware of it or even perceive it somehow.
I suppose I have dreams of like places I've been, places where there were like intense emotional memories and stuff like that. I'll remember that place as like there'll be a feeling associated with the memory of the place.
Oh, sure.
And I wonder then if that translates to other people will feel that even though their brain hadn't been to the spot, they'll sense that same memory or something.
Right, but isn't that like when you're really in the throes of like creative art? Like if you're creating art, you kind of have this. It's similar to like, when you go into dreams, you'll go into a certain space, and you get a sense of that space. And actually, if you can kind of like when you're going to sleep, if you can rest and kind of like visualize the places that you've been, kind of allowing that to be natural. Like I was in this space and I was in this space, and the nature of the space. Like if you can access that. That's like that's an assistant to like I'm sure like Frank Frazetta did that, you know what I mean, like where you like just like go into this kind of like dream realm, and you're like, oh, and you kind of try to relay that. It's very like El Dorado, like in the story of El Dorado, when they want to get the gold back from El Dorado, but then it like turns to dirt when they get to a certain point, because it's like it can't be transferred over. It's like the dream can't follow through. That's interesting that you're playing Wizard of Oz, because like as I was saying this, I was just thinking of that connection of Bluebird, which inspired the Wizard of Oz, that Russian fairy tale. What was that? Connected back to what I was just talking about. But yeah,
Madame Blavatsky's Bluebird, right? Because the idea that the color blue in that veil, or
they try to bring the bluebird back from the dream because they're asleep the whole time,
right?
And so it's like it's happiness. It's where we get the saying "bluebird of happiness," right? So it's like, but it can't translate over into this realm, or at least that's the goal, that's the task. So I see that as kind of like, if you're going to give a simple explanation of like what is the great work, it could just be taking the archetypal realm, something that's actually stable in the archetypal realm, and translating it into the external realm that we relate to, which is actually more superficial. And
I've fantasized about having a computer map my dreams since I was like 7. I've been thinking about what if I could have watch it like a TV show, my dream, because I want to remember, I want to bring it back to this realm. I want to translate it, although it is superficial, and not all feelings and emotions will be relatable through the imagery. But maybe someday you'll be able to perceive what someone else is, while you can actually net into their brain while they're asleep and like feel their dream alongside them. Maybe even you can be in their dream with them and guide them, like from your level of awareness or sentience. I guess if you're awake, you'll be able to bring the what do they call it, the lucidity into their realm. That'd be fucking wild.
What's the argument that to know that you're a dream character in another person's dream is self-awareness? It's like, Bob Dylan's like, I'll let you be in my dream if I can be in yours. Or whatever.
If that turned out with neural nets, they're like, we're stitching fibers into our brains, but on the upside, I can portal into my buddy's dream and have full sentience and guide him around and help him in his dreams. And he knows, and we've gotten to the point where we know, like, that I would do it. I think I would do it. I think I'd be like, I got to stitch into this. I can't live my life and die and not experience that. That is, to be able to see someone else's dreams and like be part of someone else's dreams. I mean, maybe that's what this is anyway, what we're doing right now, but it doesn't feel like a dream. So like a place where we know it's a dream, but then maybe you could portal into someone's dream where they don't know that you're in there through a neural net. And then it's like, why?
Right. I mean, I feel like sex is as close as we get to ending duality on the physical plane, but it only goes so far. And then it's like, you get as close as you can, and then you're in a separate body, but you never were really not in a separate body. But I think that it's possible to like dream fasting, like in the Dark Crystal, like that is a capability that we have. I think we're far more psychic. Like I was saying earlier, I think we're far more psychic than we realize. And that's like part of like a larger repression, of like, what do we think we are? We have ideas about ourselves. I think those get in the way of what we really are.
What is dream fasting?
Have you ever seen the Dark Crystal?
No,
where like
parts of it. a long time ago.
Well, there's like the Gelflings they meet. They're like the last two Gelflings met, and they dream fast together. Like she gets a full download of like his childhood and life and where he's at, like all of his conception of himself and his life path. And then he gets the same from her. So they both like kind of like hold each other and then just like get a full experience of like what the other person experienced. And then, so that's like how they meet.
Even if I could just, that's awesome. If I could just record my dreams with a neural net and then like watch them and remember, that might be like enough incentive to get stitches in my fucking brain. I can't.
Oh my God. Dude, there's a movie about that. I was trying to remember what it was on Think Tank. Maybe somebody listening can tell me, but there's a movie where somebody's doing like a dream research project. Like they volunteer to participate but they don't know what it is exactly, and they have to like uncover it. And then it turns out that they've been recording the people's dreams that have been participating. But it's like this really kind of like, you can't completely make it out, but you can get a sense of it.
Is it a TV show or?
It's a movie. It's like, I think, some crazy indie film, and it does get really fucking crazy and deals with shadow people and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Is it the Strawberry Mansion movie that came out a while ago?
No, it's really dark. It's really dark and kind of fucking scary. Kind of.
Strawberry Mansion was pretty cool, but yeah, I don't know which one you're talking about. Have you seen have you seen Strawberry Mansion?
I started. I didn't finish it. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a cool idea though. Like product placement in your dreams, like it's pretty terrible.
Kind of reminded me of The Little Prince.
I do like The Little Prince. That's a good
just
movie.
by looking at that reminds me of the dude standing on the floating thing about ready to catch a comet.
The Little Prince is based. I love Little Prince. That's the best
He
one.
would catch comets with his net and fly from planet to planet.
Dude, he loves that rose, and he like, yeah. I don't know. I can identify with Little Prince. Le Petit, what's it called? Le Petit Prince. Le Petit Prince. Okay, I'm all right. I was making sure.
Le Petit Prince.
Prince. There you go. All right, I like it.
I think I'm about to wrap.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any other things you wanted to bring up before we shut her down?
Pretty cool that we
That was a great conversation.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Pretty sweet. I'll check the comments real quick if anybody. Dreamscape is crazy. Minority Report. Somebody talked about Donald Duck earlier because of that comic book where he does the Inception thing. He-Man came up, and somebody said He-Man and what was it? He-Man and She-Ra were a power couple. According to the story, I'm pretty sure there's brother and sister. So unless you're going for some weird Caligula thing,
yeah, Tila was his woman.
I would go with Tila. Yeah, something like that. That's the Trinity: protons, neutrons, electrons. All about protons and photonics, or protons and phonics. But phonics isn't a word. Okay. Well,
wait, were they talking about He-Man? Because I brought up Frank Frazetta. I don't know, because He-Man was based off of Frank Frazetta. That's how that was like the whole conception of the thing. But yeah,
that could be a thing. We should do another thing sometime more about the Wizard of Oz. That would be cool. And yeah,
I'll talk about the Wizard of Oz for fucking hours with you guys. Sounds great.
Yeah,
sounds fantastic.
Sweet. Well, guys, you can get content from Ian Crossland from all over the internet. He actually technically has magic.sexy, but we're gonna have to like flush that page out right now. Just links to some of his other stuff, but also Crossmac and the Ian Crossland YouTube channel and Ian Crossland Twitter X and on Timcast 5 nights a week or often, I think depending on your mood. But
that's everything about what you just said is true. Andreas Xirtus.
Yeah,
MK Ultrasound.
MK Ultrasound. You can listen. That would be a thing to show really quickly, actually. Ian, you should probably check this out. I don't know if you've seen this, but David Plate, my buddy here, he does these great sync flicks, right? I think we've talked about this before. I've shown them sometimes actually at Tim Pool's at the Timcast mansion, at the castle. We would watch these on the projector a couple times here and there. He synchronizes movies with soundtracks. This is Johnny Mnemonic with White Zombie, Astro Creep 2000. And it's crazy because it's like they clearly know each other. They're doing something. These movies and these soundtracks might not have legally been able to be put together by the companies or something like that. But there's I gotta be careful with that one.
Yeah, careful that one.
That was the one with the steamy stuff going on. But yeah, this is a great way to learn about history, learn about synchronicity, check out esoterics, watch what was a good example? You had the Trade Center movie with what was that one? Jay-Z in the Trade Center?
Because the Blueprint came out on September 11th, 2001. So I played. There's a whole thing. If
the movie comes out on the same day as the album and it's about the movie, it's always a thing.
Yeah, it's not. I wouldn't put that one at the top for recommending for a good sync film, but it is pretty crazy. Like it's basically like So the very opening shot of the movie is Nicolas Cage with an alarm clock, and if you double the album, if you play it exactly twice and line up the end of the album with the exact end of the movie, then it'll make it so like the moment that the alarm clock goes off is when it starts. It's pretty ridiculous, but yeah. So then this is my website.
Yeah, so definitely check out that. That's pretty sweet. Yeah, cool. All right. Love you guys.
Great stuff, guys. See you later.
Peace.
The world is very different now. For man holds in his mortal hand the power to abolish all forms of human poverty and all forms of human life.
Begins a very special time of the year for us. It's the time of peace and reflection. One thing we should all be thankful for is that we live in America, where we have the freedom to change things and the opportunity to grow.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States. And will, to the best of your ability. And will, to the best of my ability. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help you God. So help me God.